Hey guys, welcome to Green Bean Fiction. So in today's video we are gonna see, what if Deku became god of speed and fell for Melissa's shield? Part 1. Before starting, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you are interested in MHA fanfictions. This story is El Camino de Vuelta a Casa by Valkyris_Prime. Now without wasting any more time, let's dive in. Izuku Midoriya woke up with difficulty that morning, his eyes still swollen from the tears he'd shed the night before. The image of All Might telling him he couldn't be a hero without a quirk had become a constant echo in his mind, a gaping wound that bled every time he tried to think about his future. But through it all, his mother remained his anchor. If he couldn't be a hero for the world, he would be one for her. Come on, Izuku. One more day, he muttered as he put on his school uniform. Far from his sight, in the Hero Commission offices, a series of blurry images of the young quirkless appeared on a monitor screen. Did he see it? A woman with short hair and dark glasses asked impassively. Yes, Miss Nagant. We have sufficient evidence that you were near All Might during the incident, a technician replied as he zoomed in on the drone footage. The leader of the operation crossed her arms. Izuku Midoriya wasn't in imminent danger, but his very existence represented a threat to the stability of the symbol of peace. If someone like him started speaking out, it could spark rumors the world wasn't ready to hear. Let's eliminate it. Make it look like an accident. Izuku arrived early that day, something unusual for him. He decided to avoid the bullies who always waited for him outside and took a shortcut straight home. But as soon as he stepped through the door, he felt something strange. The house was in a silence that weighed like a slab. Mom? She called in a shaky voice, but there was no answer. With cautious steps, he walked through the rooms, each corner emptier than the last, until he reached the dining room. There, his world fell apart. His mother, Inko Midoriya, lay motionless on the table. A pool of blood stained the wood. Izuku felt his breath drain from his lungs. Mom! He shouted, running toward her. His trembling hands tried to touch her, but something inside him knew it was useless. Before he could do anything else, a deafening explosion shook everything around him. The impact threw him against the wall, the heat of the flames scorching his skin. It's done. It'll look like a gas leak, Lady Nagant said, watching from a nearby building as she lowered her rifle. Her voice was devoid of emotion. It was simply a job. As the apartment crumbled around him, something inside Izuku snapped. In a desperate rush to reach his mother, something inexplicable happened. His feet began to move at a speed that defied logic, his body vibrating with a force he'd never felt before. But the speed was too much. The world around him began to warp, disintegrating into a sea of light and shadow. Izuku didn't understand. He could only think of one thing. Reach her. Save her. Mom! She cried as her body faded into the stream of time. When he finally stopped, he found himself in a complete void. Space was a vast sea of darkness, interrupted only by a constant echo. The exact moment he lost his mother. The kitchen clock read 3:47 p.m., the sound of the explosion. The scorching heat. His mother's body, cold and lifeless. Over and over again, the images repeated themselves, as if the universe itself were tormenting him. Izuku was trapped, unable to move, unable to change anything. This can't be real, she whispered, but her own voice seemed lost in the void. Minutes passed. Or maybe hours. Maybe days. Time had no meaning in that place. The only constants were the pain, the regret, the loneliness. Is this my destiny? She wondered, hot tears rolling down her cheeks. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he remembered All Might's words. You better give up. Without a quirk, you can't be a hero. I'm not a hero. I couldn't even protect her. As Izuku languished in despair, a spark of light appeared in the distance. It was small, almost insignificant, but enough to catch his attention. What's that? He murmured, taking his first step into the unknown. He didn't know what was waiting for him on the other side, but one thing was certain. I had nothing left to lose. The spark of light floated in front of Izuku, a fragment of pure energy, crystallized into shapes that defied all logic. Its warmth was both comforting and overwhelming, as if an eternal flame were contained within something as small as a drop. When he reached out to touch it, the spark erupted in a torrent of light and power. The energy engulfed him, passing through him as if no barrier existed between his body and the very essence of the universe. His mind, previously trapped in a loop of despair, was torn from that void. Suddenly, saw everything. The past, the present, and the infinite futures Izuku Midoriya could have lived. Every decision, every fork in the road, every life he could have had unfolded before him like an endless canvas of possibilities. He saw a version of himself where All Might had inherited one for all without hesitation. Another where he had never dared to speak to her and lived an ordinary life. And another, in which his bravery had led him to join the League of Villains, consumed by anger and rejection. All of this, he whispered, falling to his knees as the visions flooded him. But among all the possibilities, one constant was revealed: the truth of his present. The hero's commission. The murder of his mother. Lady Nagant's cold and ruthless decision to eliminate him to protect the symbol of peace. For them. Izuku's voice trembled, his hands clenching into fists as the Brahmastra's energy continued to flow inside him. Because of them I am now alone. The pain in his chest began to transform, a black flame igniting deep within him. Hatred grew, fueled by loss, rejection, and injustice. The Brahmastra reacted to his emotion, absorbing his anger and amplifying his power. 5. They didn't just take my dream away from me, she said, her voice cracking. They took the only thing I had left. The Brahmastra's light changed from a pure golden glow to a dark red flash, like bleeding glass. Izuku's body became enveloped in an aura of impossible speed and strength. Every fiber of his being thrumming with the Brahmastra's energy. He could feel everything now. The movements of every atom, the threads of time connecting past and future, and the lives of those who had damned him. I can see everything, and I won't let them get away. At the Hero Commission offices, Lady Nagant reviewed the final report of the incident. Everything had gone according to plan. A gas leak, a missing young man, a file closed before it could become a problem. There won't be any loose ends, Nagant said, turning off his monitor. But then, a sudden chill swept through the room. An unfamiliar presence felt nearby, as if something else were watching them. Suddenly, the lights began to flicker. On one of the security screens, a figure appeared for a moment. His silhouette was unmistakable. A young man with shaggy hair, burning eyes, and a blue and white aura that seemed to consume reality itself. Nagant frowned. Who? And then he understood. Impossible. From the shadows, Izuku's voice echoed with an intensity that seemed to break the air. You destroyed my life. Now, I'm going to destroy your world. Nagant barely had time to react before the sound of a universe collapsing filled the room. Izuku's figure slowly faded away in front of Lady Nagant, like an echo lost in time. The blue and white energy surrounding him flickered before disappearing completely, leaving behind an eerie silence. Nagant remained motionless, his body rigid with tension, but his mind was racing. What was that? He murmured, his voice barely audible. Reality had trembled at his presence. That power, that energy, it wasn't something that could be explained by any known quirk. Nagant knew that what he had just witnessed was only the beginning. In the void where he was now trapped, Izuku struggled to maintain control. The energy of the Brahmastra, it still flowed through his veins, but it felt like it was eating him up from the inside. He could feel the force of speed pulling at him, like a black hole, trapping him in an infinite loop between time and space. I can't stay here, he growled through gritted teeth, trying to move. Every step he took was like walking against an unyielding current. The energy surrounding him was both a source of power and a prison. He couldn't escape, not yet, but inside his mind, an idea began to take shape. If I can't get out now, I must get faster, stronger. Izuku took a deep breath, closing his eyes as he focused on the flow of energy within him. He had seen the endless possibilities, the versions of himself that could have existed. Now, he would use that knowledge. He would learn from his other lives, absorb their experiences, and break the chains that kept him trapped. First, I had to understand the Brahmastra. In the midst of his isolation, Izuku began experimenting with his power. His steps broke through the barriers of time, allowing him to briefly glimpse key moments in his past and future life. It was as if he could rewind and rewind at will, but without the ability to interact with what he saw. He saw himself, a little boy who dreamed of being a hero while drawing sketches of All Might in his notebook. He saw the moments he was bullied, the tears he shed in secret so as not to worry his mother. And he saw the moment she died, over and over again, as a constant reminder of why he couldn't give up. Speed became his only ally. With each step, he learned more, his movements became more precise, and his control over the Brahmastra increased. "It's not enough," he said, gritting his teeth. The energy still weighed on him like an invisible chain. "I must go further." Izuku began to push himself, pushing his body and mind beyond their limits. Every time he tried to escape the void, the Brahmastra dragged him back, but not without leaving him something in return. A little more speed, a little more control. Time ceased to have meaning. Days, weeks, or even years could have passed inside that abyss. But Izuku didn't stop. Every moment brought him closer to his goal. To free himself from the chains of speed and return to the real world. Meanwhile, in the outside world, the Hero Commission was on high alert. Lady Nagant, normally cold and calculating, couldn't hide her concern. "What do we know about that energy?" he asked, looking at the frantically working technicians. "Nothing, miss. That strength. It's not a quirk, it's something completely different." Nagant frowned. "It doesn't matter what it is. If he comes back, I won't make the same mistake." But deep down, he knew they weren't ready. Izuku Midoriya had seen beyond what anyone could comprehend. And when he broke free, he wouldn't be the same quirkless boy they'd once dismissed. Izuku took one last step into the void, and for the first time, he felt something different. The energy's resistance seemed to weaken. "I'm close," he whispered, with a mixture of exhaustion and determination. "I just needed a little more speed, just a little more." For Izuku, time no longer had a form. Within the abyss of speed, each second dilated, stretched, faded like an echo of his former life. No matter how much time passed, no matter how many centuries or millennia he seemed to be living, the only moment that remained present was the moment he lost his mother. Reliving the pain, the helplessness, the abuse he suffered as a child, Izuku sank deeper and deeper into an ocean of broken memories. But something deep within him began to awaken, an ancient, deep voice echoing in his mind, like a forgotten chant from a time before quirks, before gods, and before legends that now seemed more fantasy than reality. Savvatar. The word sounded familiar, but he didn't quite understand it. The Brahmastra's energy had begun to merge with something else, something primordial. In his mind, images of ancient myths intertwined with his pain. The swift gods, beings capable of traveling through time like a rushing river. Savvatar, the god of speed, the very personification of swiftness, of the perpetual race against time, resonated within him with terrifying force. "I am Savvatar." Izuku's voice mingled with the echo of a god. At that moment, the energy of the Brahmastra, which had previously absorbed him, began to transform into something completely new. Speed no longer consumed him, speed was him. A cobalt blue armor, metallic and gleaming, began to form around his body, completely enveloping him. The sections of the armor were imposing and intricate, but between them shone a white, almost celestial glow, reflecting the power contained within. As the armor solidified, his features were covered by a metallic helmet, impassive, revealing only two eyes shining with a fierce light, like beacons in the endless darkness of the void. The helmet was adorned with intricate engravings, symbols that seemed ancient and mystical. Each line on the armor seemed to vibrate with incalculable force, as if the very energy of the Brahmastra is being absorbed by Savvatar's essence. Outside his mind, in the vast expanse of speed and time, Izuku was no longer just a boy seeking revenge. He was a god of speed, an entity capable of seeing the past, present and future, of walking between realities, of breaking the barriers of time. "I am the herald of time. I am Savvatar." The words echoed through the void like a final statement. The energy that once tormented him now became his will. Speed was no longer an enemy dragging him down, it was his ally, his absolute power. In the vastness of that transformation, Izuku could feel the real world begin to tremble, as if time itself refused to accept him. But he no longer belonged to that reality. In the outside world, the Hero Commission agents were still struggling to understand what had happened to Izuku. They had underestimated the quirkless young man, believing his knowledge of all might to be the greatest danger. They never imagined that this child would become something greater than a hero. Nagant watched the cameras with growing concern. The same spot where Izuku had been killed by his hands was now marked by an ominous presence. "This isn't possible," he whispered, looking at the reports of the anomaly in time and space. The speed readings were overwhelming. No human, No quirk could generate such power. But then, the figure who had crossed his mind, the god of speed, materialized in his consciousness. Savvatar. Izuku, now Savvatar, was no longer limited by his humanity. Every step he took within the void accelerated his progress toward reality. His destiny was no longer about saving his mother or getting revenge on the commission. It was something much bigger. They took everything from me. Now I'm going to take reality itself from them. And with that will of a god, Izuku began to run, overflowing the space-time barrier, approaching the Hero Commission, ready to claim the world as his own. The void of speed remained his prison. No matter how much force, how much speed he applied, the real world remained beyond his reach. Every attempt Izuku made to return dragged him back into the abyss, as if a cosmic force refused to let him free. I need a fixed point. An anchor. Something to tie me to reality. His mind focused on the endless possibilities he'd seen before. Every timeline, every version of history, every pivotal moment. Time is fragile, but there are moments that break it. And then he saw it. An event resonated so powerfully that even in the abyss, its echo reached him. A flash as bright as the sun itself, followed by a shockwave so powerful it shook the foundations of reality. The confrontation between All Might and All for One. The clash of their powers, two forces that represented the symbol of peace and the symbol of chaos, resonated through the time stream. The energy of that collision not only affected the present, but also left a rift in the timeline itself. A breaking point. An anchor. That's the moment. That's my way back. Izuku's voice sounded louder than ever. His body, now completely wrapped in cobalt blue armor, leaned forward. The energy of the Brahmastra vibrated within him, making him one with speed itself. If that crash was the drum of destiny, then he would be its heartbeat. No more chains. No more prisons. He pushed forward with all the power he had. He didn't run. He flew. His body transformed into a flash of blue and white lightning that tore through the darkness. The pressure around him multiplied, the void trying to stop him, but this time there was nothing that could make him back down. Izuku forced every muscle, every fiber of his being, every particle of the Brahmastra to break through the barrier. The boundary between time and reality was broken. The world was in chaos. The confrontation between All Might and All for One reached its climax. Each blow echoed like thunder, shaking buildings and making the streets tremble. Civilians watched through screens or from shelters, holding their breath as their symbol of peace fought with all his might. The support heroes kept their distance. No one dared to intervene. They knew this battle could only be decided by the two titans. You will lose today, All for One, All Might shouted, his body on the verge of collapse, but still ready to deliver the finishing blow. No, symbol of peace. I have already won. All for One's voice was deep, powerful, but there was a crack in his confidence. The entire world watched as All Might raised his arm. The symbol of peace invoked its final blow. United States of Smash. The blow connected, the shockwave so colossal that the clouds in the sky dispersed, the earth shook, and a blast of wind swept everything around. Debris rose into the air, forming a wall of dust and golden sparkles. At that moment, something strange occurred. A blue flash crossed the rift the explosion had opened in reality. The shape of a bright beam that crossed the dust cloud and materialized right in the center of the crater. The support heroes' sensors went crazy, their systems detecting a temporal anomaly. What the hell was that? One of the technical heroes asked, staring at the screen. Something came out of the void. It's not All for One or All Might, another replied, his voice trembling. The dust began to dissipate. The debris floated slowly through the air before falling to the ground. All for One was unconscious, his body defeated. All Might was on his knees, his arms shattered and his muscular form gone. But there was another figure standing. A cobalt blue figure. A suit of armor that seemed forged from the very energy of lightning. Each piece of armor glowed with a white radiance between its cracks, as if light itself were trapped within. Its eyes were beacons of white light, cold, inhuman, staring at everything around it. The world stopped. Who's that? A civilian asked on a live broadcast. The figure didn't speak. There was no need. The whole world already knew that something had changed. All Might's eyes slowly opened. Barely conscious, but lucid enough to see the figure in front of him. Who are you? She gasped, her body trembling. The figure tilted its head, staring at the man it had once considered a hero. The armor's metallic voice echoed with an unnatural distortion, but the words carried clearly. I am the god of speed. I am Savvatar. The supporting heroes tensed. They didn't recognize this figure. He wasn't a hero, nor a registered villain. It was something else. Something completely unknown. The world watched in awe and fear. Because, even if they didn't know his name, they knew one thing. No one was safe. I am free. Savvatar's scream echoed with such force that the glass of nearby buildings shattered. The sound wasn't just a roar of victory. It was a rallying cry to the entire world. After centuries trapped within the Speed Force, Izuku Midoriya had returned, but no longer as a child, not even as a human. It was Savvatar, the god of speed. The air he breathed, the ground beneath his feet, the pressure of gravity. Everything he had yearned for an eternity in the void was now back. He felt it all. The connection to reality was more vivid than he had ever experienced before. His metallic body, wrapped in cobalt blue armor with lines of shimmering white light, thrummed with the same energy he had used to escape. Finally. I'm back. Who are you? All Might roared, still breathing heavily, his body exhausted from the final blow against All for One. Savvatar didn't respond. He didn't care. He was feeling the world again, every particle of air, every vibration in the earth. After so long with nothing but darkness and memories, everything was now absolute clarity. All Might staggered to his feet, his muscular form nearly gone, but his resolve remained strong. I asked you who you are, he shouted with the last strength of his lungs. Savvatar paused for a moment, his helmet slowly turning toward All Might, those two white eyes shining like burning stars in the gloom. There was no emotion in his gaze, only a terrifying calm. Who am I? His voice sounded like distant thunder, metallic and distorted. He took a step toward All Might, the sound of his footsteps echoing like a storm. You already know me, symbol of peace. All Might frowned, straining his mind to recognize that voice. Something about it was familiar, but the distortion made it difficult to identify. You are the one who condemned me to an eternity in darkness. After all, without a quirk you can't be a hero. The words fell like knives into Toshinori Yagi's heart. His eyes widened. The connection was instantaneous. No. That's not possible. Before he could say anything else, Savvatar moved. A flash of blue light closed the distance between them in less than a blink of an eye. A thunderous sound, like lightning striking the earth, shook the crater. The first blow connected squarely in All Might's stomach. The impact was so strong that Toshinori's body jolted forward, blood spraying from his mouth as his body was thrown backward like a rag doll. The world watched in horror. The symbol of peace had been struck, but it didn't end there. Savvatar didn't give him a second to breathe. Before All Might's body hit the ground, he was already behind him. You broke me, All Might. His metallic voice slid through the air with a chilling coldness. Now I'll break you. Savvatar raised his arm and slammed it into Toshinori's back with tremendous force. The crunch was audible to everyone. The supporting heroes, the civilians watching the live broadcast. Everyone heard that sound they would never forget. The sound of a symbol being smashed. No, one of the heroes shouted in the transmission. Someone do something. But no one moved. No one was fast enough. No one could stop what was happening. Crack! All Might's spine gave way. His body froze for a moment, his face frozen in a grimace of absolute pain. Cameras captured every second. People screamed from their homes, some cried, others stared in silence, unable to comprehend what they were seeing. Savvatar lifted him with one hand, holding him by his broken back like a trophy. The strength holding All Might was inhuman, brutal, but efficient. This is your hero, Savvatar said in his thunderous voice, addressing not only the heroes present, but the cameras, the live feed, the entire world. His voice was absolute, unquestionable. Now you will see him fall. With a sharp movement, he threw it to the ground. All Might's body slammed into the concrete with a sharp impact. There was no more power in him. No strength, no resilience. The peace symbol was broken. Savvatar looked toward the cameras. The feed was active, millions of eyes were watching him, but none of them knew who he was. Look closely, world. He raised both arms, his cobalt blue figure standing like a god atop a mountain of ruins. This is the price of the peace you built on lies and sacrifices. Savvatar's voice grew louder, his presence more overwhelming. Look closely. He paused, letting the world process the image. Because I will be your new destiny. Heroes Commission. Headquarters. Turn off the transmission. Now, one of the commission leaders shouted. The technicians typed frantically, but it didn't work. He's not responding. We can't cut the signal. Someone is holding it open from outside. Nagant looked on, his face pale. He knew what was happening. Izuku hadn't just returned, he'd taken control. It's over, she said softly, her eyes fixed on the figure on the screen. The man in cobalt blue armor with white eyes was staring directly at her. Savvatar was watching her. He knew she was there. Nagant, Savvatar's voice echoed in the control room, as if he were there with them. Don't think I've forgotten about you. His face went blank. There was no way he could hear her. There was no way he could see her, but he knew. I am Savvatar, the god of speed. The transmission flickered as the blue figure approached the camera, his white eyes staring directly at everyone watching. Make no mistake. I am not your hero. I am not your villain. He leaned forward slowly, filling the screen with his metal mask. Thousands of people gasped as the camera captured only his eyes. I am the end of your era. Prepare yourselves, because I am coming for all of you. Absolute silence. The world had witnessed something they could never forget. The symbol of peace had fallen. In the minds of every hero, civilian, and villain, a single word echoed, a name that would be remembered for generations. Savvatar. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a villain. He was speed itself, and now he was racing toward them. The cold night wind blew between the destroyed buildings. The flames still flickered in the ruins of the battlefield. Dust continued to float in the air, while debris slowly fell, as if the world itself refused to accept what had just happened. The symbol of peace lay on the ground. Gran Torino, the veteran hero, watched the scene from above. His heart, normally as steady as steel, beat with a force he hadn't felt since his youth. His face was marked by disbelief and terror. He had never seen Toshinori like this. He hadn't just fallen, he had been crushed. No. It can't be. His voice was a broken whisper. The image of All Might being lifted from behind and thrown to the ground played over and over in his mind. Gran Torino clenched his fists tightly. He prepared to charge into combat, but then his eyes fell on the cobalt blue figure standing in the middle of the crater. This man wasn't ordinary. There was something about the way he moved, the way he remained calm, as if everything around him was under his control. Savvatar. The name still echoed in his mind. He didn't understand where it came from, but he'd heard it on the broadcast along with everyone else. That name had already been etched into the consciousness of humanity. UA Student Lounge. The television was on. The students of Class 1A watched in horror. No one spoke. No one could speak. Katsuki Bakugo shot to his feet, his face twisted in anger and disbelief. What the hell is going on? Why isn't anyone moving? He yelled, glaring at the support heroes surrounding All Might on the broadcast. Stop watching and do something. Shoto Todoroki watched the broadcast in silence. He said nothing, but his body was rigid. His eyes, usually cold and indifferent, now reflected a mixture of fear and uncertainty. Savvatar didn't act like a simple villain. The precision with which he had struck All Might, it was no coincidence. Who is that man? Momo Yaoyorozu murmured, her hands trembling. Savvatar. He said his name is Savvatar, Kirishima commented, his eyes fixed on the metallic figure. His voice didn't have the same energy as usual, but rather something more fearful. He doesn't feel like a common villain. That doesn't matter. Bakugo shouted, slamming the table hard. He's just another asshole who needs to be defeated. Sensei will just get up and kick his ass like always. But then, on the screen, they saw the image of All Might lying on the ground. He wasn't moving. The silence was absolute. No. Ochako whispered, covering her mouth with both hands, unable to look. It can't be. Millions of people in their homes, in bars, in shelters, watched with their eyes glued to the screen. The broadcast could no longer be controlled by the Hero Commission. There were no cuts, no censorship. The stark image of All Might defeated and the blue god of speed standing over him was the only thing all citizens could see. The man who never fell was broken. The children began to cry. The adults trembled, some falling to their knees as they watched their symbol of peace fall. It was as if the world had fractured along with All Might's spine. What are we going to do now? Asked a woman, hugging her son as they watched television. Dad, why isn't All Might getting up? A boy asked, tears in his eyes. No one had an answer. In the crater, Savvatar remained silent, staring at Toshinori's body. His breathing was slow and controlled. He didn't need to speak, didn't need to say anything more. His presence spoke for him. He was the end of the era of peace. The metal helmet looked down at the heroes slowly approaching the crater, Gran Torino at the head. Savvatar didn't move, he feared nothing. What do you think you're doing? Gran Torino asked, his voice firmer than he felt. Showing the truth. Savvatar's voice was a calm thunder. Each word carried the weight of a cataclysm. Peace doesn't exist. Only the illusion of peace. Gran Torino leaned forward, ready to move. If he had to die today, he would do it fighting. I won't let you escape. Savvatar gave a cold, metallic laugh. Escape? You old fool. I am speed itself. Crack. Gran Torino barely had time to see Savvatar's figure before a brutal blow struck him in the side. The sound of bones breaking was loud and clear. The old hero was thrown high into the air, falling heavily to the ground, coughing up blood. Gran Torino! Shouted one of the supporting heroes, running toward him. Get away from him! Savvatar raised his hand, and the white light shining through its cracks intensified. A shockwave erupted from his body, a blast of energy that knocked all the support heroes back, leaving them sprawling among the rubble. The world had seen All for One's strength. They had seen Stain's determination. But what they were witnessing now was something different. It wasn't strength, it wasn't madness, it was unstoppable speed. The sky was red with flames from the ruined buildings. Smoke rose into the sky, mixing with the cold night air. The screams of the citizens had faded, left behind along with the initial chaos of the battle. Only the two of them remained, Savvatar and All for One. Savvatar's cobalt blue armor gleamed with the light of the flames. The white lines running across his body shone with blinding intensity. His eyes were 2 points of pure white light, like stars in the darkness. In front of him stood the man who symbolized fear itself. All for One. The leader of the villains, the man who had controlled the world from the shadows for generations. His black mask and breathing tubes expelled steam with each heavy breath. But even now, with the mask torn to pieces, his eyes still showed absolute confidence. He wasn't afraid, because he'd never had to be afraid. Impressive, All for One said in a deep, throaty voice as he stood up. You're different, Savvatar. You're not just fast, you're something more. Savvatar didn't respond. There were no words to say. The world felt too slow for him. All for One's every move was like watching a turtle swimming in water. But Savvatar saw everything. I saw every muscle move. I saw every plan form in his mind. You don't have to do this, you know, All for One said, his voice soft, almost friendly. Like a teacher speaking to a student. You and I, Savvatar. We could change this world. You could have everything you wanted. Everyone who failed you will bow to you. Savvatar didn't move. All for One stepped forward, extending a hand toward him. Make no mistake, kid. I am not your enemy. I am your opportunity, he said, with a smile that felt more like a steel trap closing. The world will never accept you. It will never accept someone like you. No matter how many times you run. Savvatar lifted his head slowly. The white eyes in his helmet lit up. Then I won't run, he said in a cold, inhuman voice. The voice of someone who has seen eternity. All for One blinked. He didn't understand at first. What? He asked with slight confusion, but it was too late. A deafening roar shook the battlefield. The world shook. Savvatar had disappeared. No, it didn't disappear, it had moved. First, it was a blow to All for One's side, an impact that sent him staggering to the right. Then another one on his back, then another one on his jaw. Then another one in his abdomen. Coup, coup, coup. 20 strokes. In less than a second, each one stronger than the last. All for One's mind tried to process what was happening, but he couldn't. His body was thrown from side to side, unable to understand where the blows were coming from. What's happening? He screamed, the blows spinning him around in the air like a rag doll. The sensors of their perception quirks couldn't track Savvatar. Not just because he was fast, but because he was too fast to exist in a single position. "Show yourself, coward," he roared, with the fury of someone who had never been in this position. Savvatar appeared in front of him for just a millisecond. All for One's eyes widened. "I'm not the coward here," Savvatar replied, his voice as cold as a void. The final blow was to the center of his chest. Savvatar had circled the globe 20 times. Every time he passed by All for One, he hit him with the force of his entire body, with the force of speed itself. The impact was so strong that the ground beneath All for One shattered into pieces. The shock wave spread across the entire battlefield, destroying buildings, windows, and everything else nearby. All for One's body was pushed backward, breaking the ground as his back collided with a concrete wall, which instantly shattered. For the first time in his life, All for One felt afraid. For the first time in his life, he knew what it meant to be surpassed. His mask was shattered, his body was torn apart, and his lungs struggled to breathe. "No," he said in a weak voice. "No, it can't be." Savvatar appeared before him once again, not running, not fleeing, just showing up. All for One looked up, his body shaking with pain. You're not a hero," he muttered through gritted teeth. You're just like me, a monster." Savvatar leaned toward him, his cobalt helmet glowing with the white light from within. "I'm not like you," he said coldly. "I am a god, your god, I am Savvatar." He stood up slowly. The wind blew hard, carrying dust and debris with it. Savvatar looked toward the horizon. He didn't look at All for One again. "It's over," he said as he began walking forward. Each step echoed on the shattered earth. All for One tried to move. He tried to get up, but his body wouldn't respond anymore. He'd lost the fight. No, he'd lost something more important than the fight. He had lost his legend. The symbol of fear had ceased to exist. Savvatar didn't look back. He didn't need to, because when you look back, that's when you start running away again. And he wasn't running anymore. Savvatar took a step forward, each step creaking the ground under the pressure of his energy. His voice echoed once more, this time louder, clearer, directed at every man, woman, and child watching through the screens. "Remember my name." He spread his arms as if welcoming the entire world. "I am Savvatar, the god of speed, and no matter what hero comes." He leaned towards the camera that was still filming him. "None of them will be fast enough." The signal was cut off. The world fell silent. The children cried. The adults trembled. The heroes hesitated. The symbol of peace and fear had fallen. And in the mind of each person, one word shone like an indelible mark on history. Savvatar. Not a hero, not a villain, a god. In a small room filled with screens, wires, and tools scattered everywhere, Melissa Shield watched the livestream, her heart breaking. Her breathing was rapid, her hands shaking as she watched the figure of her uncle, Toshinori Yagi, All Might, being mercilessly beaten. Each blow echoed not only in the broadcast, but also in her heart. No, this isn't happening," she murmured, her eyes filling with tears. Her body shook with a mixture of horror, rage, and despair. When he saw All Might's back being shattered, his world crumbled for a moment. The symbol of peace, his uncle, his hero, was fallen. No, get up, she screamed, slamming both hands on the table. Her breathing became erratic, tears streaming down her cheeks as helplessness filled her. But then, something inside her changed. Fear gave way to determination. "No, I won't just sit here." She wiped her tears with the sleeve of her jacket and sat down in front of her computer. "I can't just sit there and do nothing." His hands raced across the keyboard, his brain working at full speed. If he's faster than light, stronger than any hero, there must be something to it. No one is invincible, no one. Melissa gritted her teeth tightly, her eyes filled with determination. Melissa began accessing the files of the Hero Commission, a highly protected security system. But she wasn't just a programmer. She was Melissa Shield. Digital barriers were just another obstacle she had to overcome. Her father, David Shield, had taught her how to use technology since she was a child. There was no system she couldn't break if she set her mind to it. Access denied. Access denied. He grinned furiously as he typed faster. Not this time. He used his own decryption algorithm, a tool he'd designed to help heroes recover data from locked systems. He never thought he'd use it for this. Each line of code fell like dominoes, and little by little, the digital doors began to open. Access granted. List. Quickly, she accessed the Temporal Anomalies and Uncatalogued Threats section. There were classified files that even high-ranking heroes couldn't see. But Melissa wasn't a licensed hero. She was a shield. Keyword: Savvatar. The results appeared. The first files were confusing. Hindu mythology, references to ancient gods of speed, mentions of the word Savvatar in ancient legends about a god of light and speed. But then he saw something he hadn't expected. Temporal anomaly detected. Location: near the All Might versus All for One battle. A temporal anomaly. Melissa leaned closer to the screen, zooming in on the data. There were graphs of fluctuations in space-time, like waves vibrating around All Might's confrontation. And just as the wave reached its peak, Savvatar appeared. So he doesn't belong in this timeline, she said softly, her mind racing. How did he get here? And why now? He opened more files, this time on concepts of extreme speeds. There he found theories written by scientists from the Hero Commission. The Speed Force theory was mentioned in unofficial texts. The documents spoke of a dimension of infinite speed, where the laws of time and space were distorted. Speed Force. Melissa stared at the screen, her eyes darting back and forth as she hurriedly read. It's a prison, it's a damn prison. She understood. Savvatar hadn't just escaped from some time void. He'd been trapped there for a reason. And if he'd escaped, it meant he was now disconnected from time and reality. No. No, no, no. Melissa banged the table, frustration filling her. If he didn't belong in this timeline, then the normal rules wouldn't apply to him. Think, Melissa, think. The resonance. His eyes snapped open. The collision of All Might and All for One. The resonance of the power blast was what allowed Savvatar to enter reality. That's it. He used resonance to force his way in. He quickly stood up and ran to his bookshelf, searching for a notebook. His hands were shaking, but his mind was clearer than ever. If the resonance of the collision of two massive forces brought it in, then the resonance could expel it. As she continued searching, she began studying the armor. Fragments of the live feeds gave her clear images of the details of Savvatar's armor. Using reconstruction software, Melissa generated a 3D model on her computer. Come on, show me something, show me a weakness. He rotated the 3D model over and over. There were no visible cracks. There were no obvious weak spots. But there was something peculiar. The fragments of bright white energy seeping between the armor plates. The light, he said, his eyes narrowing as he analyzed the flow of energy. It's not just aesthetics. They were vanishing points. The speed, the energy within, was seeking escape. There you are, you can't contain all your power, can you? Melissa smiled with a mixture of fury and satisfaction. Those points of light, they're your weakness. It couldn't just be an ornament. It was a power vent. A safety valve. Without those valves, Savvatar's body would collapse under its own velocity. If I can overload or close them, I'll force him to lose control of his own speed. Melissa Shield wasn't a hero. She didn't have a quirk. She didn't have a power. But she had her mind. And that, at this moment, was more than enough. It wasn't just a matter of saving his uncle anymore. It was about saving the world. Very well, Savvatar, he said as he began typing frantically, compiling a report, generating schematics for a device. His breathing was steady, his eyes no longer trembling. He was like his father, only better. You thought you could defeat humanity just because you had the speed of a god. Holograms of Savvatar's armor projected around her as she rotated and analyzed every inch. Calculations, designs, simulations. Melissa was already several steps ahead. But no one is faster than a shield. The world had already witnessed the fall of All Might. They had seen the rise of a god of speed. They had lost hope. But one person had not lost hope. Melissa Shield did not give up. And while the world wept and the heroes hesitated, Melissa began to build the cage for a god. The world remained silent. The screams had ceased, the voices muffled by the weight of reality. The peace symbol lay on the ground. Toshinori Yagi, better known as All Might, lay face down. His body was broken, his back fractured, blood staining the ground beneath him. Every breath was agonizing. The pain was immense, but it didn't compare to the weight of the truth he had just realized. Without a quirk you can't be a hero. That phrase. He'd said it so many times in his mind, silently regretting it, but he never thought he'd hear it again. Much less from that voice. Savvatar's voice. No. It can't be. He coughed blood as he slowly raised his head, his blurred vision focusing on the cobalt blue figure in front of him. Savvatar approached slowly, his steps heavy but steady. The ground creaked with each step. His presence was like that of a god walking among mortals. The white energy seeping through the cracks in his armor illuminated the darkness of the night. The entire world watched. Savvatar's helmet tilted toward him, his white eyes shining like two headlights in the gloom. Without a quirk, you can't be a hero. He repeated the phrase with terrifying calm. The same phrase Toshinori had said to a child years ago. Toshinori's eyes flew open. His mind, muddled with pain and exhaustion, finally made the connection. No. It can't be. You're not. Savvatar slowly crouched down, bringing himself to Toshinori's level. His helmet tilted, regarding the defeated hero with a gaze that somehow seemed filled with contempt. Say it. His metallic voice was soft, but each word boomed like thunder. Say it loud, symbol of peace. Toshinori's lips trembled. He didn't want to accept it. He didn't want to believe it. But he couldn't deny it anymore. The way he moved, the way he spoke, the way his presence dominated the scene. Izuku. The word was barely a whisper, weak and broken. Izuku. Midoriya. Savvatar was silent for a moment. He didn't deny it. He didn't need to. It was the truth. It took you a long time to realize it, symbol, he said with a mixture of mockery and bitterness. Perhaps if you had used that brilliant hero's wisdom earlier, things would be different. Toshinori's eyes filled with tears. Guilt fell upon him like a mountain. Izuku Midoriya, the boy he'd rejected, the boy he'd looked up to with hope and admiration only to be shattered by her words. I'm sorry. Toshinori's voice was a barely audible whisper, but Savvatar heard it. Heard it clearly. He stopped. His body tensed. Anger bubbled beneath the surface. Do you feel it? He asked, tilting his head slowly, his helmet reflecting the moonlight. His voice was deeper, more intense. You say you feel it. The air froze. The Brahmastra's energy flared, the white light seeping from the armor growing more intense, like a storm about to break. The entire world felt the pressure. Sorry won't bring my mother back, Toshinori, he said coldly. His voice, thick with hatred, was like the roar of distant thunder. Sorry won't undo the damage you caused with your words. You didn't give me power. You didn't give me hope. You dragged me into the darkness. Savvatar raised his arm with a swiftness that could barely be picked up on the transmission. A blue flash crossed the air. His fist slammed into Toshinori's side, causing him to cry out in pain. The blow echoed throughout the crater, shattering the ground beneath them. Your sorry means nothing to me, he screamed, his voice thick with ancient fury. I lived for centuries in darkness, trapped, alone with my thoughts and my hatred, all thanks to you and the hero commission. Another blow. This time, Toshinori's jaw was the target. The hero's head tilted to the side as blood dripped from his mouth. I was just a kid, All Might. Savvatar lowered his voice, but this time, each word was a dagger straight to Toshinori's heart. A kid who just wanted to be a hero. Just wanted to save people, like you. And you told me I couldn't. You told me I wasn't enough. Toshinori's eyes filled with tears. There were no excuses. He couldn't defend himself. He knew he had failed. I'm sorry, Izuku. I'm sorry, he repeated, his words mixed with coughs of blood. Savvatar stared at him silently for a few seconds. The light in his eyes flickered. Something inside him wavered for a moment. A spark of humanity lost. But the spark was smothered by the accumulated hatred of centuries of suffering. The spark wasn't enough to stop a god. Too late, Toshinori. He raised his arm, intending to deliver the finishing blow. The whole world watched. The cameras captured everything. Civilians screamed in their homes. The heroes watched, unable to move. The students of UA watched in horror as their teacher's figure fell under the hand of a god. Savvatar lifted Toshinori with one hand, holding him by the neck. "Look, world," he said, looking into the cameras. "This is the symbol you worshipped. The man you called peace. Look at him now." Savvatar turned slowly, showing Toshinori off like a trophy. "Their peace has been broken." Toshinori's eyes looked up at the sky, his lips moving, barely whispering. "Izuku, please." Savvatar looked down at him, his helmet reflecting the image of a broken man. For an instant, the world held its breath. Was there a spark of mercy in him? "No," was the only answer. With monstrous force, Savvatar threw Toshinori's body to the ground, leaving a crater around him. The symbol of peace didn't rise this time. Savvatar looked up at the sky, his body emanating flashes of blue and white energy. His arms opened wide, as if embracing the night itself. "You don't need heroes anymore. I am the only truth. I am the beginning and the end. I am Savvatar." The world watched in silence. The world understood one thing clearly. The world was no longer theirs. From the shadows, the Hero Commission watched in horror. From a room full of screens, Melissa Shield gritted her teeth. "I'll stop you," she said, her face covered in tears. "It doesn't matter how fast you run, Savvatar. I'll stop you." But the world already knew the truth. The symbol of peace had fallen. The world had seen Savvatar. And now, no one was safe. Heroes Commission, headquarters. Chaos reigned in the control room. Monitors projected live images of the global broadcast. Savvatar was on every screen, his cobalt blue figure dominating every angle. The phrase, "the symbol of peace has fallen," ran like a news ticker on every channel, the anchors' voices mere murmurs amid the sound of alarms echoing through the Hero Commission headquarters. "Turn off the broadcast. Disconnect all media signals. Communication," shouted one of the supervisors, sweating as he checked the security systems. "We can't. It's blocked. We have no control over the networks." Another technician replied, typing frantically, his eyes wide with panic. "The signal is being maintained from an external source. We can't cut it." The panic was absolute. The high-ranking heroes gathered in the main hall. Some shouted orders, others demanded explanations, but no one had an answer. They all stared at the frozen image on the main screen, Savvatar standing over All Might's motionless body. "What's going on?" a high-ranking hero asked, his face pale as snow. "Who is that thing? What the hell is Savvatar? It's not a... What?" Lady Nagant's voice cut through the room like a sharp blade. Silence fell over the room. Everyone looked at her. She was always known for her precision, her control, and her coolness. But this time, her face was somber. She wasn't the same Lady Nagant they had seen before. "It's a... who?" he said in a voice full of gravity. The heroes exchanged glances, disbelief, confusion, but one of them stepped closer, his voice filled with fury. "What do you know, Nagant? If you know something, say it now. That monster is destroying the image of heroes in front of everyone." She didn't respond immediately. She stared at the screen, her eyes fixed on Savvatar's figure. She could see him. She didn't just see the metallic armor, the white light seeping through its cracks, or the glowing, inhuman eyes. She saw the boy they'd condemned. "It's Izuku Midoriya," he finally said, his voice heavy. The silence was total. Murmurs began immediately. Some laughed, others simply stared at her in disbelief. "Don't talk nonsense, Nagant. That child died in a gas leak. That was the official report," one of the supervisors shouted. The report was a lie. His response was direct, without hesitation. "We eliminated it." The highest-ranking heroes, the very ones who had signed the reports, lowered their gaze. The new recruits, the technicians, the agents, all looked at their superiors in horror. That can't be true," one of the technicians muttered. Did they kill him? A child. He wasn't just a kid," another supervisor said, his tone justifying himself through gritted teeth. "He was a threat to the symbol of peace. He knew too much." Lady Nagant glared at him. "No, he wasn't a threat. He was a child," he said, his eyes blazing with anger. "A child who saw All Might in his weakened form. And the Commission, in their paranoia, decided that was reason enough to kill him. To protect the peace, they said. They called it a controlled risk, and sealed the file with a damn lie about a gas leak. The eyes of the lower-ranking heroes filled with revulsion. Some looked at their superiors as if they were monsters. And they were right. So what now? You think you can cover this up too? Lady Nagant turned to face everyone in the room. You can't. The world has already seen it. They already know his symbol has fallen. And he won't stop. Izuku Midoriya won't stop until all of us have fallen too. One of the technicians, his eyes wide open, asked in a trembling voice. Why? Why are you doing this? Lady Nagant closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath, before responding in the coldest voice they had ever heard. Because we took everything away from him. Nagant office 2 years ago. He's just a kid, Nagant, one of the superiors told him as they reviewed the drone footage. We won't take any chances. He doesn't have a quirk. He's not a threat, Nagant replied, a slight coldness in his tone. He won't do anything. He's just a kid. Children talk too, Nagant. They talk too much, the supervisor replied. If the word, All Might is weak, reaches the public, there'll be no turning back. We must control the information. She didn't respond, but her silence was enough. The higher-ups made the decision. And that afternoon, Izuku Midoriya's house was destroyed by a gas leak. I'm sorry, Nagant murmured then, looking at the screen where the image of the burning house was displayed. I'm sorry, kid. Present Commission headquarters. So what now? One of the heroes shouted. How do we stop something that can control time and speed? We don't have All Might, and the other heroes are no match for it. Nagant stepped forward, his gaze filled with a determination he hadn't shown in years. He won't stop, he said, looking at everyone present. He won't stop until everyone responsible for his suffering is dead. That includes every one of us. One of the heroes punched the wall in anger. So what do you suggest? That we turn ourselves in? Lady Nagant looked at the screen. Savvatar's image was still there, his helmet reflecting the world he had decided to destroy. Don't give up. Prepare yourselves. Because he's not Izuku Midoriya anymore. He's not a child anymore. He's not alone anymore. Everyone looked at her. They were waiting for her to say something hopeful. Something that would give them a way to win. Now he's Savvatar, the god of speed, and we're his prey. In the outside world, on a rooftop, Savvatar looked down at the city from above. His cobalt blue figure was illuminated by the white lightning emanating from his body. Skyscrapers rose before him, but no wall or barrier could stop him now. Beneath his helmet, there was no laughter, no joy, no excitement. Only determination. I heard them, Nagant, he said, looking toward the Commission's hidden camera. He knew they were watching him. There's no way to escape me. There's no place in this world where you can hide. A blue flash. He disappeared in a flash of light, crossing the city at impossible speed. They created it. They condemned him. And now, he's back. I am Savvatar, his voice echoed through the hacked transmission waves. I am the beginning and the end. There is no one faster than me. And this time, I will show no mercy. The city was a blur of light and shadow. Savvatar raced through the streets, a flash of blue and white, leaving lines of crackling energy in his wake. Cars stopped, pedestrians froze, unable to comprehend what had just happened. To them, it was only a fleeting flash, but to him, the world moved at a slow pace, as if each second stretched out over an eternity. For a god of speed, even light was slow. As he crossed the city, the world flashed before his eyes. He could see the civilians in their homes, their television screens still showing the image of his body standing over All Might. The screams of horror, the scared faces, the children's tears, it all looked so clear, so obvious. But to Savvatar, they meant nothing. Fear had no power over a god. Until he saw her. At first, it was just another image among many. Another dark alley, another street in the city. But when his eyes fixed on it, something stopped inside him. Not his body, not his speed, but his mind. A girl. She was crouching in the corner of an alley. Her body was shaking, her head down, her arms covering her face. Her snow-white hair was dirty and matted. Her pale skin was covered in blood-stained bandages. She wore a hospital gown that was far too large for her, hanging off her small body like a blanket. A girl with a horn on her head. Savvatar stopped. For the first time in centuries, he stopped. The world still moved slowly around him, but he didn't move forward. He watched the girl, her white eyes glowing from inside her helmet. He had seen much suffering in his life, but this scene was familiar. Too familiar. Fear, pain, despair. Savvatar's eyes flickered beneath his helmet. Memories came flooding back. He saw himself, small, alone, crying in the darkness after being told he couldn't be a hero. His mother who had been the only one to comfort him. But she was gone. The hero commission had taken her. And now, this girl, was him. Not again, he murmured, his deep, metallic voice echoing in the void. He approached the alley, his steps barely making a sound. Not even speed could disrupt the calm with which he moved. The girl slowly raised her head. Her red eyes stared at him with pure fear. No. No. She said, her voice shaking, backing against the wall. Her legs wouldn't stop shaking. I don't want to go back. I don't want to. Savvatar didn't say anything at first. He stared at her, his helmet reflecting her small figure. The dirty bandages, the cuts on her legs, her tiny fingers stained with dried blood. He was a child again. The same child he had been. The same child they had broken up. Who did this to you? He asked in a voice colder than steel. Eri jumped when she heard him speak. She didn't move, just stared at him with wide eyes, as if she didn't know whether to respond or run away. Tell me, girl, he said more forcefully this time, but not violently. His voice demanded the truth. She whispered, hugging herself, her small arms barely able to cover her own body. Eri's eyes filled with tears. Kai will find me if I talk. I can't. That name meant nothing to Savvatar at first, but then his perception expanded. He shifted slightly, accelerating his body to peer beyond the alley. And there it was. Kai Chisaki. The man walked with his hands in his pockets, his bird mask covering his face, but it couldn't hide the aura of absolute control he projected. His pace was slow, but each step echoed in Eri's mind. Two of his subordinates followed closely behind him, their gazes cold and lifeless. The eyes of predators. Eri, come here. Chisaki's voice was soft, almost paternal, but each word was like a slowly dripping poison. Don't waste my time. You know you shouldn't run away, right? Eri's eyes widened. Terror froze her. She began to sob through gritted teeth, her body shaking uncontrollably. Savvatar looked at her. His heart, no, his will, hardened. Are you scared? Savvatar asked, his voice metallic and distorted. Eri nodded, unable to speak. Savvatar turned toward the alley entrance. Chisaki was only a few feet away. So, he will do it too. The energy blast was so sudden that the windows of nearby cars shattered. Kai Chisaki didn't even have time to blink before a cobalt blue beam crossed the distance between them. In less than a breath, Savvatar was in front of him. Chisaki stopped dead in his tracks. What the, was all he could say before a metal fist hit him with the force of a hurricane. Crack. Chisaki was sent flying, his body slamming into the concrete wall of a nearby building, shattering it like paper. Dust and debris rained down around him. Chisaki's subordinates froze, their eyes wide, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Savvatar stood there, motionless. His helmet slowly turned toward the two men. The white light in his eyes grew brighter. Run away, he said, his voice metallic and icy, or face the wrath of a god. The two men didn't hesitate. They ran as if their lives depended on it. Savvatar ignored them. They weren't his target. He had something more important to do. He returned to the alley. Eri was still there, hugging herself. Her eyes were filled with tears, but this time she didn't back down. The cobalt blue figure slowly knelt, the white light from its helmet illuminating its face. You don't have to run anymore, child, he said, his voice much softer than before. The monsters won't find you this time. Eri looked up in surprise. Her small body stopped trembling. She didn't understand who this man was, but for the first time, she didn't feel the same oppression she had with Chisaki. Do you promise? He asked in a barely audible voice. Savvatar stared at her silently. Memories of his own childhood swirled in his mind. His mother's words, her pain, her loss. Children shouldn't be burdened with fear. I promise you. For the first time, the world saw something more than a god of speed. It saw a spark of humanity in the storm of revenge. Savvatar had promised to protect a girl, and the gods do not break their promises. Kai Chisaki Overhaul slowly rose from the rubble. His body shook from the impact. He felt the stabbing pain in his ribs, and something in his left arm wasn't moving right. It was probably broken, but that didn't matter. None of it mattered. TCH. What the hell was that? He muttered, coughing up blood as he stood up, his face twisted in anger and confusion. He brushed the dust off his jacket, adjusting the bird mask on his face. He didn't like being dirty. He hated it, and now he was covered in dust, blood, and bits of concrete. But more than that, his pride had been hurt. He looked towards the alley. There she was, Eri, his weapon, his project, his key to unifying the underworld. His gaze immediately focused on the white-haired girl standing behind the cobalt-blue figure. Eri. He spoke her name in a deep voice, with an edge of threat. As if a simple word could make her obey. Eri clung to Savvatar's arm, partially hiding behind him. Her red eyes, once filled with dread, were now fixed on Chisaki, a mixture of fear and something else. Hope. Chisaki narrowed her eyes at the girl's reaction. Eri had never hidden like that before. She'd always been under his control. She'd always obeyed out of fear. So what had changed? The cobalt-blue figure. And who are you, bastard? Chisaki asked, his voice thick with contempt. A hero. A villain who wants to play savior. Savvatar didn't respond immediately. There was no rush. For a god of speed, time was always on his side. He turned slowly. Chisaki felt a chill run down his spine. Not from the movement, not from the cobalt-blue armor, nor from the white light flickering through its cracks. But from the eyes. The glowing white eyes of Savvatar's helmet stared back at him with an intensity no human should be able to project. Who am I? Savvatar bowed his head, his metallic voice echoing like thunder itself. I am the end of you, Chisaki. Chisaki frowned. She didn't like that answer. She didn't like things she didn't understand. HMPH. Another cockroach with delusions of grandeur, he mocked as he started walking toward the alley. I don't care who you are or what you want. That child belongs to me. She's part of my project. Do you know what that means? Savvatar remained silent, his body motionless. Chisaki continued speaking, as if he wanted to regain control of the situation. It means you can't take her. She's the key to a world without quirks. A clean world. My world. Chisaki raised an eyebrow when she didn't receive a response. What's wrong? Don't you have anything to say? Don't you understand the magnitude of my goal? Before he could process what was happening, Savvatar was in front of him. His face was inches from the metal helmet. Chisaki felt the cold of the armor even through his mask. I understand one thing, Chisaki. Savvatar slowly raised a hand, white energy seeping through his metal fingers. You think you're a god because you control a child. Crack. The world broke. The sound of Chisaki's left leg bone breaking was so loud that the two subordinates who had fled earlier stopped in their tracks and looked back. Chisaki's leg twisted at an impossible angle, and a cry of pain escaped his throat. He collapsed to one knee, his trembling hands trying to steady himself. My leg, damn you, he screamed, his voice filled with rage and pain. Savvatar looked down at him, his helmet reflecting the image of Chisaki kneeling before him. Like a king looking down on a fallen subject. I don't care about your project, Chisaki. Savvatar raised his voice, his tone sharper, more ferocious. I don't care about your ambition or your vision of purity. You're just another man who thinks he's invincible because he's never felt true fear. Savvatar stepped forward. Chisaki tried to back away, but her broken leg wouldn't let her move. Fear was beginning to seep into her eyes. I'm going to show you fear, Chisaki. Savvatar raised a hand, the Brahmastra's energy gathering in his fingers. Blue and white sparks swirled, as if the air itself was being torn apart. I'm going to show you what it's like to face a true god. In an instant, Savvatar's hand moved. A burst of blue light spread throughout the alley. The wall behind Chisaki fractured like a spiderweb of cracks. A direct blow to the stomach. Chisaki's body was lifted off the ground, his feet dangling as energy vibrated through his body. The world sped into slow motion for Chisaki. Her vision was fading. The pain was total. Her body no longer responded. Eri is not your tool. Savvatar's voice grew colder, more deadly. She doesn't belong to you. Not anymore. With a swift movement, Savvatar threw Chisaki to the pavement. His body bounced once before he lay motionless on the ground, his mask cracked and blood dripping from his mouth. Absolute silence. Eri stared at the scene, eyes wide open, trembling. Not because of Savvatar's fear, but because her monster had fallen. Savvatar turned to Eri, the blue and white energy still vibrating around him. He knelt down to her eye level, and this time, he spoke in a softer voice. "Do you know what this means, girl?" he asked her. Eri shook her head, her eyes filling with tears. "It means you'll never have to fear again." She looked at him, her tears flowing more heavily. With clumsy steps, she approached him and hugged him. She embraced the cold cobalt armor of a god of speed. Savvatar stood still for a moment. His hands moved slowly, uncertainly. He couldn't remember the last time he'd felt a hug. But this time, he accepted it. "Thank you," Eri murmured, her voice almost inaudible. Savvatar said nothing. His white eyes flickered beneath his helmet. Something stirred inside him, something he hadn't felt in centuries. It wasn't power, it wasn't speed, it was peace. And for that brief moment, the speed god's anger was quelled. But only for a moment. Because the hero commission still existed. And his mission was not yet over. "Come on, kid," he said finally. "I'll show you a world where you don't have to fear anyone." A blue flash crossed the city. And Eri, for the first time, felt free. The sound of the television filled the small living room of the apartment. The news repeated the same story over and over again. The symbol of peace has fallen. The world seeks Savvatar, the self-proclaimed god of speed. Images of All Might defeated and Savvatar's body on top of him continued to play on the screen. Reporters speculated endlessly. Who was he? What did he want? Was he a villain? A god? But in that small room, a white-haired girl wasn't paying attention to the television. Eri was looking elsewhere. She looked at her savior. Izuku Midoriya, now without his armor, was sitting on the couch. Without the mask, without the breastplate, just him. His green, tangled hair fell over his face, his bright green eyes were tired, but peaceful. His face bore traces of weariness, small scars on his forehead and jaw, marks of battles and the endless time he had spent in darkness. But he was human. For the first time in a long time, Izuku felt human. His body was covered in a simple gray t-shirt and black sweatpants. He wore nothing else, and that was intentional. The cobalt blue armor sat in the corner of the room, shiny and imposing, as if it were still alive. But to Izuku, it was nothing more than a tool. The armor wasn't power. The armor only limited the impact his speed had on the laws of the universe. He ran a hand through his hair, ruffling it even more. He was exhausted, but not physically. Mentally. His body never tired, but his mind, that was a different story. Eri watched him silently from the bed. The girl was wrapped in a white blanket, her large red eyes blinking occasionally as she watched Izuku's every move. There was no fear in her gaze. No more. There was curiosity. "Are you hungry?" Izuku asked, looking at Eri with a tired smile. Eri looked at him with wide eyes, as if she didn't understand the question. "Can I eat?" she asked timidly, her voice soft and cracking. Izuku felt a lump form in his throat. That answer destroyed him inside. He didn't say it out loud, but the idea of a child having to ask if she was allowed to eat filled him with anger. It wasn't an explosive anger. It was a silent anger. One that never went away. You can eat whatever you want. No one's going to say no. He calmly got up from the couch, heading for the apartment's small kitchen. In the blink of an eye, he was back with a sandwich, a chocolate bar, and a bottle of juice. The speed of a god. But this time, he only used it to help. He crouched down next to Eri and handed her the chocolate bar. "Here, little one," he said softly, smiling genuinely. Eri looked at the chocolate bar as if it were something she'd never seen before. Her trembling fingers held it carefully, as if she were afraid it would be taken away from her. "Can I really eat it?" she asked again, her eyes filled with doubt. Izuku nodded slowly. "Yes." And if you want another one later, I'll bring you more. Eri cried. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but this time it wasn't out of fear or pain. It was relief. She ate. Izuku sat beside her, watching her take small bites of the chocolate bar. He didn't speak. He didn't pressure her. He was just there. The Hero Commission had placed massive bounties. Capture or death. It didn't matter. Every newscast, every website, every forum was flooded with a single question. Where is Savvatar? The heroes patrolled the streets more frequently. Aizawa, Hawks, Endeavor, Best Jeanist. They were all searching for him. But no one could find him. They couldn't find anything faster than light. In a world where security cameras and radar monitored everything, Savvatar couldn't be detected. By the time anyone saw a blue flash, he'd already been there and gone. The heroes knew they were at a disadvantage. The whole world knew it. But for Izuku, time didn't matter. Sitting on the couch, his body relaxed, he felt something he hadn't felt in centuries: calm. Eri fell asleep after eating, wrapped in the blanket, the chocolate bar still in her hands. Her face held a peace it had never felt with Chisaki. Izuku looked at her, and for a moment, the whole outside world stopped mattering. I wonder if this is what it feels like to be a hero, he murmured softly, staring up at the ceiling. No, I'm not a hero. All Might's words were still fresh in his mind. You better give up. Without a quirk you can't be a hero. Izuku closed his eyes. I'm not a hero, am I? He told himself, looking at his hands. They weren't covered in blood, but his memory was. He had destroyed All Might's back. He had made the Commission fear his name. Savvatar, God of Speed, the destroyer of peace. But then he looked at Eri. Eri, who was now sleeping in peace. No, I'm not a hero. But for her, I'm enough. Izuku looked at the television. His face reappeared. Wanted. Savvatar. Dangerous. Extremely hostile. Hostile. He stood up and walked to the window. From there, he could see the city of America. New York. Skyscrapers rose, lights flickered in the night. People continued to live, afraid, but living. The world was looking for him. But they couldn't catch him. Keep looking, he said with a sarcastic smile, looking out at the city. Keep looking for me. Because, for Izuku, it didn't matter how long it took to attack the Hero Commission. He could wait. Time means nothing to someone who's spent an eternity in darkness, he said calmly as he looked out over the city. And if they decided to catch him, he'd be long gone before they could react. I'm Izuku Midoriya, he murmured, looking at his hands once more. Human. No armor. No mask. But I'm also Savvatar. He turned and looked at Eri. The girl slept peacefully. And for the first time in a long time, so did he. Melissa Shield's room was dark, lit only by the glow of the multiple screens surrounding her. Codes and simulations were projected on each one. Data lines flickered incessantly, each a piece of a seemingly impossible puzzle to solve. Savvatar defied everything: terminal velocity simulations, friction analysis, kinetic energy, entropy. Every known scientific theory fell short. Neither relativity nor quantum mechanics could explain Savvatar. Every simulation he created broke down within seconds, the equations exploding with infinity not defined errors. It doesn't make sense, Melissa muttered as she leaned her head on the table, rubbing her eyes with both hands. She hadn't slept in days. The dark circles under her eyes were deep, but she couldn't stop. Not when she knew someone like Savvatar was out in the wild. A being that could not be caught. There has to be something, there has to be a way to stop him. Her voice was barely a whisper. Her brain was working at full speed, but frustration was beginning to consume her. The screens projected images of the cobalt blue armor, slowly rotating in a 3D model. On either side of the screen were snippets of text, some mythological, others old Hero Commission documents. The names of ancient gods like Savvatar, Hermes, Quicksilver, Quetzalcoatl, and other mythological speedsters were displayed over and over again. Even fictional accounts from the pre-quirk era were there. Every mention of a speed god or being was archived. But nothing matched Savvatar. None of those gods broke reality the way he did. Nothing fits. Melissa bit her lower lip, her mind searching for a connection, a pattern she could use. Then the notification appeared. What the? He straightened immediately, his tired eyes now fully open. A security alert. It was an activity tracker he'd installed on the Hero Commission's servers. He'd created the program to detect any attempt to access important files related to Savvatar. And now the Hero Commission was getting access to one. No. No, no, no. What are you doing? Melissa began typing rapidly, her fingers pounding the keys at the speed of desperation. Access denied. Not this time, Commission. He opened his decryption software, the same one he'd used earlier to access the Commission's database. The folder was encrypted with an Omega-level security system, one that would normally take weeks to decipher. But I don't have weeks, he typed rapidly, his heart pounding. He applied 3 layers of brute force algorithms, while his own artificial intelligence system worked to break each layer of encryption. Cover 1. Unlocked. Cover 2. Unlocked. Come on. Come on. Her breathing quickened, the tension growing with every second. Cover 3. Unlocked. Access granted. Melissa froze for a moment. She'd done it. She'd opened the file the Commission was desperately trying to protect. The file's title appeared at the top of the screen. Case eliminated. Izuku Midoriya. No. Her eyes widened. She felt the air thicken, her breathing slow, as if she knew she was about to see something that would change everything. It wasn't just any report. It was a deleted file, one of those dirty operations the Hero Commission used to hide under the guise of public peace. Mission briefing. Anomaly elimination. Target: Izuku Midoriya. Date: 2 years ago. Reason: exposure to critical information about All Might's condition. Action: covert elimination due to gas leak. Melissa felt a knot in her stomach. She couldn't believe what she was reading. Her eyes darted around as she scanned the documents. No. No. It can't be, he muttered, clenching his jaw. There were images. Images of Izuku's house destroyed. Surveillance drone footage showed Izuku standing in front of the table where his mother lay. Dead. No. No, she screamed, her trembling hand covering her mouth. Inko and Izuku Midoriya had been killed. Risk of information leakage. The mother was classified as an obstacle and eliminated along with the target. Melissa felt her body shake with anger and sadness. An innocent mother, murdered just to keep the truth from coming out. But then came the most shocking part. Anomaly detected. Izuku Midoriya was not located after the explosion. Status: missing. Missing. Melissa frowned. No, he wasn't missing. She knew it now. He hadn't disappeared. He'd been thrown into the Speed Force. The documents didn't say it outright, but the temporal readings from the moment of the explosion showed space-time fluctuations. The same type of anomaly detected when Savvatar appeared during All Might and All for One's battle. It didn't disappear. It was broken. They condemned him. Melissa clenched her fists so tightly her knuckles turned white. They cast him into the darkness. Now I understood. Now everything made sense. Savvatar was not born out of nothing. Savvatar was created by the Hero Commission. They did this. They killed their mother. They left him trapped in the void. That's why he hates them. Her voice trembled, her heart breaking. He didn't become a god. They made him a god. He leaned forward, covering his face with his hands. His body shook with anger, but also with helplessness. It wasn't fair. It wasn't fair to Izuku. A boy with dreams of being a hero. A boy who just wanted to save people. And they had destroyed it. But Melissa wasn't confused anymore. Now she understood everything. She understood why the heroes couldn't catch him, why the heroes couldn't stop him. Because they were the cause. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. But she wouldn't cry for long. Now I had a purpose. I'll find you, Izuku. Her voice was firm, her eyes shining with a new determination. No matter how fast you run, no matter how fast you are, I'll find you. Not to catch you. He stared at the frozen image of Izuku Midoriya as a child on the screen, his smile bright, full of dreams. To save you. The screen displayed the last line of the report. Objective: total control of the narrative. Izuku Midoriya doesn't exist. Flashback. 2 years earlier. The light from the monitor illuminated Izuku Midoriya's face, revealing his youthful, innocent features. He was a boy full of dreams, with eyes full of hope. On the screen, Melissa Shield's image flickered with a warm smile, her blonde hair tied in a ponytail as she leaned toward the camera. So, what do you say, Izuku? Melissa asked, smiling broadly. When are you coming to see me? In person this time. Izuku scratched the back of his neck with a nervous laugh, but his eyes were filled with excitement. I'd love to, Melissa. But my mom always worries about me when I go out alone, he said with an awkward smile. But this time I asked her permission. And she let me. Melissa let out a small laugh, resting her head on one hand. Wow, you have to teach me your secret technique for convincing parents, he said with a mischievous smile. Izuku blushed a little, waving his hands in front of the camera. It's not that, I just told him I'd be with a friend and that I wouldn't be alone. Her smile widened. I promised I'd be okay. Melissa smiled warmly. There was something about Izuku that made her feel safe. Maybe it was the way he spoke, or the way he always tried his best, even when he didn't have a quirk. She'd seen plenty of people with incredible powers, but she'd never seen anyone with willpower like Izuku's. So it's settled. We'll meet in person this time. Melissa leaned into the camera with a knowing smile. No last-minute cancellations, okay. Promise, Izuku said, giving me a thumbs up. See you then, Izuku. See you, Melissa. The screen went black, and Izuku's room fell silent. He stared at the black screen for a moment and smiled. I made it. I'm going to meet her in person. Meeting day. Shopping center. Melissa Shield looked at her phone for the 5th time. The screen displayed her last conversation with Izuku. Izuku. See you tomorrow. I can't wait to see you in person, Melissa. Melissa. Don't be late, Izuku. Semicolon closing parenthesis quote. But hours had passed. 2 hours. Melissa sat on one of the benches in the mall's waiting area, watching the crowds passing by. She hugged herself, feeling a little awkward. It wasn't the first time someone had stood her up, but with Izuku, it was different. Maybe he was late, she said to herself, trying to convince herself. He looked at his phone again. He had sent her several messages. Melissa. Everything okay, Izuku? Did you get lost? Melissa. Are you close yet? Melissa. If you're lost, tell me where you are and I'll find you. Unanswered. The knot in her stomach tightened. What if something happened to him? What if something went wrong? Calm down, she told herself, trying to stay calm. This isn't the first time someone's been late. But this was not a normal delay. Izuku always responded, always. Hours later, Melissa's home. Melissa walked into her house with a defeated expression. She slumped into her swivel chair and threw her purse to the floor. Her chest felt heavy, not from exhaustion, but from disappointment. It can't be that he just didn't show up, she whispered, staring at the ceiling with a mixture of frustration and sadness. Why didn't Izuku show up? Maybe he forgot, or his mom didn't let him go, she said to herself, looking for an excuse that would calm her down. She decided to turn on the television to distract herself. Maybe some news, a series, anything. But what she saw took her breath away. Tragedy in the city of Musudafu. A gas leak causes an explosion in a residential complex. 2 deaths confirmed. No. The presenter spoke in a deep and serious voice. The explosion occurred yesterday afternoon. The bodies of Inko Midoriya and her son, Izuku Midoriya, did not survive the blast. Melissa's world stopped. No. Her breathing became labored, and she leaned toward the television, her hands clutching her legs. It can't be. No, this has to be a mistake. The footage showed Izuku's house destroyed. Firefighters were searching through the rubble. The fire was still visible in some parts of the house. Melissa felt her throat close up. Izuku. No. Her voice was barely a whisper, her body beginning to tremble. Her eyes filled with tears. He remembered the promise he made to her. Promise. She remembered Izuku's smile as he gave her a thumbs up. No. She screamed at the top of her lungs, throwing the remote control to the floor. Tears streamed down her eyes. It couldn't be true. It couldn't be. You promised me, he said, his voice breaking, covering his face with both hands. The boy who always answered her messages. The boy who always got up, even when the world told him he couldn't. The boy who just wanted to be a hero. He was dead. Melissa cried until she was exhausted. She fell asleep on the table, tears still streaming down her face. Present Melissa's lab. Melissa looked at the Hero Commission's classified file. Gas leak. Elimination. Target. Izuku Midoriya. It wasn't a gas leak. It was murder. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. His eyes didn't shed tears this time. Not because he didn't want to cry, but because now he understood everything. You didn't leave me hanging, she said in a low voice, sounding sad. You were never going to leave me hanging, were you, Izuku? He remembered their last video call. He remembered her smile. Promised. Melissa gritted her teeth, feeling a fury she'd never experienced before. She couldn't save him that day. But this time, she wouldn't fail. He stood up from his chair and looked at the screen with the commission file. Izuku was back, not as a child anymore, but as Savvatar. I'm not going to let you continue alone, Izuku. Not this time. Her eyes were filled with determination. If no one else wants to save you, then I will. Melissa's hands began to type with pinpoint precision. She was no longer seeking to stop him. Now she was seeking to understand him. I'm going to bring Izuku Midoriya back. And this time, there would be no gas leak that could stop her. Melissa turned off the screen and stood up. She knew what she had to do. You're wrong, Commission, he said softly, his eyes burning with a new flame. Izuku Midoriya is still here. And I'm going to bring it back. Musudafu Hospital, room 301. The sound of the heart monitor was constant. A beep, 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 that cut through the silence of the room. The air was thick with the scent of disinfectant, and the fluorescent lighting flickered slightly, as if it too was on the verge of collapse. Toshinori Yagi slowly opened his eyes. His vision was blurry. The white light from the ceiling blinded him for a moment, causing him to blink several times until his eyes adjusted. His body felt heavy. The pain was constant, deep, especially in his back. He tried to move, but his body wouldn't respond. Where am I? He murmured, his voice cracking and weak. He looked around, recognizing the hospital room. The white walls, the vital signs monitoring machine. He understood immediately. I lost, he whispered. He remembered the battle. He remembered Savvatar. He remembered his defeat. He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to ward off the memory, but it was no use. The image of Savvatar holding him by his broken back, displaying him to the world like a trophy, returned to his mind. Izuku, she said with a lump in her throat, her body shaking with pure guilt. Izuku Midoriya, the child he had rejected. The child he had abandoned. The boy the Hero Commission had destroyed. I'm a fool, Toshinori whispered, feeling a tear run down his cheek. I condemned him. I condemned him. Click. The sound of the door opening brought him out of his thoughts. He slowly turned his head toward the entrance. Two figures entered the room. David Shield y Melissa Shield. David's face was serious, with a worried expression he rarely showed. His body was rigid, his hands in the pockets of his lab coat. But the one who caught Toshinori's attention was Melissa. Melissa wasn't smiling. His gaze wasn't the same as always. His eyes, which normally shone with optimism and warmth, were now dark, filled with determination and disappointment. She knew. Toshinori felt the weight of that gaze and couldn't bear it. He looked away, staring at the ceiling, unable to face them. Uncle, Melissa spoke in a voice that didn't sound like her own. It was colder, more controlled. It was no longer the voice of a child searching for answers. It was the voice of someone who had already seen the truth. Tell me the truth. Did you know? The world stopped. Toshinori felt a chill run through his body. He didn't want to hear that question. He didn't want to answer it. Melissa, her voice cracked. She tried to sit up, but her body wouldn't move. Don't try to move, uncle. I don't want you to change the subject. Melissa took a step forward, approaching the bed. Her eyes were fixed on him, like a judge waiting for the defendant's confession. Answer the question. Did you know what they did to Izuku? Did you know what the commission did to him? David Shield watched from the doorway, his arms crossed and his face hard. He, too, was waiting for the answer. Answer me, Melissa demanded, slamming the table next to the bed. The thud echoed throughout the room. Izuku trusted you. I trusted you. Did you know what they did to him? The silence became suffocating. Toshinori closed his eyes tightly, his lips trembling. His throat felt dry. He wanted to lie. He wanted to say he didn't know. He wanted to salvage what little dignity he had left. But I couldn't lie anymore. Not to them. Not after what happened. Yes, he replied in a barely audible voice. Yes, I knew it. Crack. Something broke. It wasn't a bone, it wasn't a wall, it was something more. The bond of trust between Melissa and Toshinori. Melissa froze, as if she'd been punched in the stomach. Her eyes widened, her lips trembled, and her breathing became ragged. No. No. He whispered, taking a step back. He shook his head, as if he couldn't accept what he was hearing. No, you couldn't have known. You couldn't have known. David lowered his head. He understood now, too. Melissa. Toshinori tried to speak, but his words came out slurred. His voice no longer held the strength it had before. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't go against the commission. They had control. They told me it was the only way. Melissa looked up sharply, her eyes filled with fury. The only way, she cried, her voice breaking. Tears began to fall down her face, but not from sadness. From pure rage. He was a child, Toshinori. A child you rejected and then let die. I didn't mean for him to die. Toshinori cried, forcing his voice out, his eyes filling with tears. I thought they were just going to silence him. They told me they wouldn't hurt him. That they would just control him. Melissa took a step back, moving away from the bed. Her hands were shaking. You knew something was wrong, and you did nothing. Her voice was barely a whisper. You knew Izuku was going to die. You knew Izuku trusted you. And yet, you did nothing. David's shield clenched his fists. Is that all you have to say, Yagi? He asked, his voice low but full of contempt. David's shield had never looked at Toshinori like that. I thought they'd just control him. Is that your excuse? Is that the reason you let a child die? No. No. Toshinori shook his head, closing his eyes, tears streaming down his face. The weight of guilt crushed him. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Melissa turned away, her fists clenched, without saying another word. He didn't look back. David followed her, but before leaving, he looked at Toshinori one last time. Melissa admired you, Yagi. Izuku admired you. Now, all that's left is a broken man who let them both die. The door closed with a click. Toshinori was left alone. The guilt weighed more than any wound Savvatar had caused. I'm sorry, she murmured, her voice muffled, her body motionless. I'm so sorry, Izuku. I'm so sorry, Melissa. The tears didn't stop this time. There was no strength, no symbol of peace. Just a man destroyed by his own choices. Meanwhile, on a distant rooftop, a blue flash crossed the sky. Savvatar looked down on the city. He felt something. He didn't know why, but he felt like someone had remembered his name. Izuku Midoriya, he said, looking toward the horizon. That name doesn't mean anything anymore. He put on the cobalt blue armor and looked down. The world was looking for him. Only Savvatar remains, and the world will not be able to escape me. The world has never seemed so big. Eri stood on top of a mountain. The fresh air hit her face. The breeze gently moved her white hair, now clean and neat. Her face looked toward the horizon, her red eyes reflecting the endless sky. For the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid. The world was immense, infinite. Beside her, a figure watched her silently. Savvatar. But this time, he wasn't wearing armor. This time, it was Izuku Midoriya. His tousled green hair blew in the mountain wind. He was wearing a simple jacket, a white t-shirt, and dark pants. His gaze wasn't focused on Eri. He, too, was staring at the horizon. The world. The two of them stood there, watching in complete silence. The trees danced in the wind, the sky stretched like an endless blue sea, and the birds flew freely across the sky. Eri took a deep breath, closing her eyes. It was the first time she'd felt fresh air. Not the cold, dirty air of Chisaki's underground labs, not the controlled air of the cells where she'd been held prisoner. This air was different. It was open air. It smells good, she said softly, her eyes still closed. Her small smile was sincere, sweet, full of something I'd never felt before. Izuku slowly turned his head to look at her. His green eyes watched her for a moment, silent. He remembered the first time he breathed fresh air after emerging from the darkness. It was the same as now. Yeah, it smells good, Izuku replied, a light smile on his lips. A smile he hadn't had in ages. Eri leaned forward, resting her arms on her legs, looking out at the distant mountains. Everything was so vast. Rivers wound between the mountains, trees stretched out like a green tapestry. It was everything she'd always wanted to see, but never had the chance. I never thought the world was so big, she said, still amazed by the view. I always thought it was small. Like a cage. Izuku understood her better than anyone. That's what happens when you're locked up for too long. His voice was soft, calm. His eyes also gazed at the vastness before them. The world feels small when your eyes only see walls. But when you finally step outside, you realize it was always huge. Eri turned to look at him. Were you in a cage too, Izuku? She asked, with the innocence of a child who still didn't understand the magnitude of the question. Izuku remained silent. He didn't respond immediately. His eyes flickered slowly, and his gaze shifted to the ground. The cage that trapped him had no bars. It had no door or lock. It was darkness itself. Yes, he finally replied, his voice heavy with fatigue, but also with sincerity. A cage I thought I'd never get out of. Eri didn't say anything. She just looked at him with those big, red eyes, but this time not with fear, but with understanding. She understood him. She understood him in a way no one else could. But we're not in cages anymore, right? Eri asked with a small smile, tilting her head innocently. Izuku looked at her. For a moment, time stood still. She was right. They weren't in cages. Not anymore. No, not anymore, he said, nodding. His smile was weak, but real. The monsters can't reach us here. Eri laughed. A sweet, pure laugh. The laugh of a child who had finally found a safe place in the world. Yes, they can't catch us, he exclaimed, raising his arms to the sky. We're faster than the monsters. Izuku sat on the grass, crossing his legs and resting his elbows on his knees. His heart felt a little lighter. He looked at Eri and saw something he hadn't seen in centuries. Hope. Not in the world, not in heroes, in her. That's it, Eri, he said with a calm smile, his eyes looking up at the blue sky. We're faster than the monsters. None of them will be able to catch us. The Heroes Commission had mobilized everyone. Heroes, drones, radars. Every corner of the world was being watched. Every security camera, every live stream, every public space was monitored. They were looking for Savvatar. But it didn't matter. Because Izuku couldn't be caught. Not by drones, not by radar, not by heroes. The world was never fast enough to catch him. And now he had someone to protect. Later that night, Eri and Izuku stood at the top of the Eiffel Tower. The lights of France spread out beneath their feet like stars on Earth. Eri stared fascinated at the flickering lights. Look, Izuku, it looks like the night sky, but on the ground, he said, pointing excitedly. Izuku looked at the lights. Yes, I guess so. Eri looked back, with a curious expression. Do you think the people down there are scared? Izuku fell silent. He knew the answer. The image of himself, as Savvatar, standing over All Might had been broadcast around the world. The world feared Savvatar. Yes, he said honestly, looking out at the city. They're afraid. Eri crossed her arms and frowned. Monsters should be afraid, not people, she said firmly, looking at the city with a frown, like a little warrior. Izuku looked at her in surprise. He couldn't help but laugh, a genuine, unexpected laugh. That girl was incredible. You're right, Eri, he said, gently ruffling her hair. Monsters should be afraid. Eri looked up, with a proud smile. So why don't you show the monsters what it feels like to be afraid? Izuku fell silent. He looked into her eyes and, for a moment, saw the same spark in her as his mother. That tiny flame that never went out, no matter how dark the night. Yes, I think I'll do that, he said, with a calm smile. He stood up, extended his hand and looked at Eri. Come on, little one. The world is big, I'll show you everything. Eri took his hand. Come on, I want to see the ocean, she said excitedly, jumping up and down with joy. Izuku chuckled. The ocean, huh, it's fine. A blue and white flash crossed the night sky. The world was looking for them. The heroes hunted them. But none could reach them. Because this time, they weren't running alone. They ran together. Musudafu Hospital, room 301. The sound of the heart monitor was the only noise in the room. Beep, beep, beep. The monotony of the sound was almost comforting, a reminder that Toshinori Yagi, the man who had once been the symbol of peace, was still alive. Until everything stopped. The monitor's sound suddenly cut off. The air in the room thickened. The atmosphere felt different, heavier, more oppressive. And then came the flash. White and blue. The flash was so quick it was barely felt. A flicker of light, a spark that lit up the room for a second. But when the light faded, he was no longer alone. Standing at the foot of the bed was Izuku Midoriya. He wasn't wearing Savvatar's cobalt blue armor. He didn't need the armor. It was just him. His green hair was tousled, his face serious but serene. He was wearing a white t-shirt and black pants. It wasn't the appearance of a god. It was the appearance of a human being. But Toshinori's eyes filled with terror. Not because Izuku was there, but because he knew why he was there. You knew it. Izuku's voice was soft, but the gravity in his words made the entire room feel smaller. His green eyes bore into Toshinori, his hands relaxed at his sides, showing no sign of violence. He didn't have to do this. His mere presence was enough. You knew, Izuku repeated, taking a step forward. His gaze was cold, calculating, but beneath it all, there was something else. Pain. You knew what they did to me and my mother, didn't you? Toshinori didn't respond. His breathing became labored. He tried to move his lips, but the words wouldn't come out. His body trembled. Answer. Izuku's voice exploded with a force that made the windows rattle. It wasn't a scream, it was thunder. The pent-up fury of centuries of suffering. Toshinori gasped, his eyes filled with fear. I didn't know they'd do that, she finally said, her voice breaking. I didn't know they'd kill her, Izuku. I didn't know they'd do that to you. I thought they'd just control you. Izuku remained silent. His eyes didn't blink. He didn't move a single muscle as Toshinori's words fell through the air like broken blades. Control me, he asked calmly, tilting his head slightly. Control me, you say. The air became even heavier. The room seemed smaller, darker. They didn't control me, Toshinori. Izuku took another step forward, each step a judgment. They broke me. They left me in the darkness for centuries. Do you know what it means to be alone in the darkness, Toshinori? Do you know what it feels like to be trapped without time, without space, without anything? Toshinori closed his eyes tightly, tears streaming down his cheeks. He couldn't look at him. He couldn't. I didn't know, Izuku. I swear, I didn't know they'd do that to you. His voice cracked, his body shaking like a little boy facing a nightmare. You knew enough, Izuku snapped, his voice filled with suppressed fury. He didn't scream, but his voice shook everything. You knew the commission was lying. You knew they weren't heroes. You knew my mother and I were in danger, and yet, you stayed silent. You stayed silent. Silence. The truth could no longer be hidden. Toshinori let out a sob, his face covered by his hands. Guilt crushed him. He was no longer the symbol of peace. He was a broken man. I'm sorry, she murmured through tears. I'm so sorry, Izuku. There's nothing I can say to make it right. I'm sorry. Izuku watched him silently. He showed no compassion, but he didn't show cruelty either. He just watched. Sorry. His voice was soft this time. But the weight of that word was as heavy as a mountain. You think that fixes everything. I'm sorry. Toshinori slowly lowered his hands, showing his tear-filled face and red eyes. No, I don't think so. Correct. Izuku tilted his head, his expression blank. The face of someone who had seen and felt too much. Because sorry doesn't change anything. It doesn't revive my mother. It doesn't give me back the years that were stolen from me. Izuku took another step closer, now standing right next to the bed. His shadow completely covered Toshinori's body. Do you know why I'm here, Toshinori? He asked calmly. Toshinori looked at him, his face filled with fear, but he nodded slowly. He knew the answer. I'm here to give you your sentence. Izuku slowly raised a hand. It wasn't charged with energy. There were no lightning bolts or flashes. It was just his hand. Your sentence, or your forgiveness. Toshinori held his breath. Your fate isn't up to me. It's up to you. Izuku leaned forward, his face inches from Toshinori's. Their green eyes met. Tell me, Toshinori, were you a hero that day? Were you? Toshinori felt his throat close. He wanted to say something. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to say he tried to protect him. But he couldn't. He didn't have the right. No. He said weakly. I wasn't a hero that day. Izuku stared at him for several seconds. The time felt like an eternity. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stared at him. Fine, Izuku finally said, his calmness at odds with the tension in the room. He lowered his hand slowly, his eyes still fixed on Toshinori. Then live with it, Toshinori. Live with it every day. I won't give you the peace of death. I'll give you the condemnation of guilt. His voice was as firm as steel. I'll leave you with your conscience, because I know it's more painful than any wound. Toshinori closed his eyes, the tears falling harder. He didn't protest. He didn't apologize. Because he knew Izuku was right. Goodbye, Toshinori. Izuku turned around, his footsteps silent as he approached the window. The blue and white flash illuminated the room once more, and when the light faded, Izuku was no longer there. Toshinori stared out the open window, the cool wind slowly drifting in. He felt no relief. He felt no peace. He only felt the weight of his own decisions. I'm sorry, Izuku. I'm so sorry. His words were lost in the wind, inaudible to anyone except himself. In the distance, a blue flash crossed the sky. The world was searching for it. Huro ya no era Izuku Midoriya. It was Savvatar, and the world would never be fast enough to catch up. Ua Officina de Nezu. The dim light from the desk lamp illuminated the room. The shadows of the shelves filled with old books and documents were projected on the walls, creating a solemn atmosphere. The silence was absolute. Sitting in his small leather chair, Principal Nezu stared at the screen in front of him. A file. Case eliminated. Izuku Midoriya. The raw, unfiltered truth. Nezu didn't blink as he read every line of the report. He didn't move. His eyes followed every word, every sentence, every lie disguised as justification. The words, gas leak, and risk controlled, were repeated over and over again. The falsehood was so obvious it disgusted him. You wretches, he whispered, closing his eyes for a moment as his small body leaned forward. His front paws clasped together as if he were praying, but there was something about his face that was rarely seen on him. Rage. Principal Nezu didn't usually show emotion. He was always analytical, always calculating. But this time, logic couldn't calm the anger in his heart. Izuku Midoriya, the boy without quirk, the boy who just wanted to be a hero. The boy that the Hero Commission destroyed. You could have come to me, Izuku, he said softly, as if the boy could hear him from somewhere. It would have done something. It would have changed your fate. But it was too late. The image of the Midoriya house destroyed appeared on the screen. The flames, the rubble, the bodies. Nezu didn't look away. He couldn't. He had no right. Her small legs trembled slightly as she leaned against the table. Her mind, always calculating, always precise, began to plot every possible path she could have taken. If only I'd known sooner, he told himself. Thinking about what could have been wasn't something he usually did. But this time, he did it. Mental simulation. What could have been? Scenario 1. Immediate intervention. Nezu imagined a scenario where he had learned of Izuku Midoriya's case before the Hero Commission acted. In this version, he would have intercepted the Commission agents. They have no authority to do this. The agents would have tried to argue. They would have told him it was, for the sake of peace, and that Izuku Midoriya wasn't important. But Nezu wouldn't have been fooled. Isn't it important? A 14-year-old boy who witnessed the truth about the peace symbol. Do you think I'm that naive? Nezu would have hidden Izuku at UA. He would have used his resources to protect him. Even if the Hero Commission pressured him, Nezu would have stood his ground. If they want to take Izuku away from me, they'll have to do it in front of the press, in front of all of Japan. Izuku would have lived, he would have gotten an education. He would have had a family at UA. And Savvatar would never have existed. Scenario 2. Intervention after the gas leak. If only I had seen the signs earlier. Nezu imagined himself investigating the gas leak more carefully. He would have seen the truth. The data didn't add up. The space-time fluctuations, the disappearance of a child without a trace, the fact that the house had exploded so conveniently. No, none of that would have escaped his mind. If only I had known earlier, he murmured, clenching his small fists. In this version, he would have followed the temporal anomalies. With the help of his tracking systems, he would have detected the appearance of fluctuations in the timeline. The same fluctuations that were detected the day Savvatar appeared. I would have known Izuku wasn't dead. Her voice was stronger this time, full of conviction. I would have done everything possible to find him. Nezu imagined himself developing technology to track temporal anomalies. With the help of Melissa and David's shield, they could have found Izuku before he became Savvatar. They could have rescued him from the Speed Force. But they didn't. And now it was too late. Scenario 3. Direct intervention. And if I had recruited him earlier? Nezu whispered, his gaze lost in the screen. He imagined himself walking through the streets of Musudafu. He saw himself talking to Izuku's mother, Inko Midoriya. He imagined Izuku standing next to his mother, nervous, his eyes full of hope. Mrs. Midoriya, allow me to offer your son a path. A place where it doesn't matter whether he has a quirk or not. UA can teach him to overcome any limits. He imagined Izuku's face, the excitement, the happiness. He imagined the look of hope in Inko's eyes. If I had recruited him earlier, there would have been no Savvatar. There would have been no monsters to hunt. There would have been no need for revenge. I was too slow. Nezu leaned his forehead against the table, his eyes closed tightly. His mind, so sharp, so calculating, had failed him. He had seen the pieces on the board too late. Forgive me, Izuku, she whispered. Forgive me for not seeing your pain sooner. Nezu opened his eyes slowly. Simulations meant nothing. He couldn't change the past. He couldn't save Izuku. But he could save the future. Determinedly, he sat up straight and looked at the file screen. Izuku Midoriya was no longer a child. He was now Savvatar. I'm not going to lose you again, Izuku, she said, her eyes filled with resolve. I won't let the Hero Commission get you first. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. Melissa, soy Nezu. Melissa's voice came on the other end of the line, tired but firm. What do you want, Nezu? I know what you're doing. I know you're looking for Izuku. The silence felt like an infinite pause. But Melissa didn't deny anything. And, I want to help you, Nezu said firmly. The Hero Commission will hunt him down like an animal. I won't allow it. Why? Melissa asked, her voice tense. Why would you do that now, when you didn't do anything before? Nezu closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Because I made a mistake. And I won't let another child pay the price. Melissa didn't respond immediately. But then, a single word came through the line. Good. The call ended. Nezu looked at the screen once more. Savvatar. The god of speed. The boy the world had abandoned. I can't change the past, Izuku, she whispered. But I can still save your future. His eyes shone with determination. I won't let them catch you. Not this time. In the distance, a blue flash crossed the night sky. The world was looking for him. But this time, someone was also looking to save him. Musudafu, Midoriya apartment ruins. The place was in ruins. The shattered walls were covered in soot, and debris still littered the floor. The remains of a life long gone. Fragments of charred furniture, pieces of burnt wood, and shards of broken glass. The air had a smell of ash that never fully dissipated, even though years had passed since the explosion. And at the center of it all, there he was. Savvatar. The cobalt blue armor gleamed in the flickering light of the sky. The white energy seeping through the cracks in the armor flickered like a beating heart. The figure of the god of speed was imposing, immovable, like an indestructible statue that had withstood the test of time. Izuku Midoriya looked at the remains of the apartment. Your apartment. The place where his mother used to cook. The table where they used to eat together. The place where he felt safest. Everything was gone. Nothing remained of it. But in his mind, everything was as clear as crystal. He could see it. He could see his mother, Inko Midoriya, standing by the stove, preparing dinner with a warm smile. He could see the way she turned to look at him, always with a soft, calm smile. The way she would say, "How did it go today, Izuku?" His chest tightened. Savvatar's helmet showed no expression, but inside it, Izuku was screaming. His body was motionless, but his mind was constantly moving. He could go back. He could do this. I could run into the past. I could save her. I could stop the explosion. I could prevent everything. But I've already tried. I'd tried it many times. I'd seen what happened. In every timeline he ran back in time to save her, the paradox unfolded. The timeline tore apart, the universe rewrote itself, and in the end, she vanished. The woman he so desperately wanted to save vanished into dust before his eyes. It was worse than death. Not again, he said softly, his metallic voice echoing. It wasn't a scream of rage. It was a whisper of pain. I don't want to save you only to watch you disappear again. He raised his hand and looked at the remains of the living room table. The same table where he had last eaten with his mother. He wanted to touch it. He wanted to feel it. But he didn't. He couldn't. The past was a place that even a god of speed could not change so drastically. The universe always took its toll. Heroes Commission. Monitoring Center. Distortion detected. One of the technicians shouted from his post. His hands flew over the keyboard. Speed force located on Musudafu. Repeat. Musudafu. The operator's eyes widened. For the first time in weeks, Savvatar was in one place. He wasn't moving. He wasn't running. It's now or never, shouted one of the supervisors. Deploy the heroes. Deploy everyone. Endeavor. Hawks. Eraserhead. The trio was immediately mobilized. Savvatar is in Musudafu. He's immobile. This is our chance. Alarms sounded throughout the monitoring center. The heroes geared up, their suits activated, and the helicopters began mobilizing. This was their only chance. Endeavor, can you hear me? The operator's voice came over the communication line. Loud and clear, Endeavor's voice was stern and cutting. Your target is Savvatar. Don't let him move. We don't need you to tell us twice, Hawks replied with a cocky grin as he adjusted his wings. Eraserhead didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The three of them headed to Musudafu. Musudafu, Midoriya apartment ruins. The sky darkened. Black clouds began to gather. Thunder rumbled in the distance. The harbinger of the approaching storm. Savvatar continued staring at the remains of the apartment. He didn't move. But he felt the distortion. He didn't need to look back. He already knew they were coming. He could feel the waves of energy caused by the severed air. The three heroes were just seconds away from arriving. Endeavor, Hawks, Eraserhead. Izuku didn't sigh. He felt no need to. Here come the heroes, he said in a hollow voice. No hatred, no anger, no emotion. He didn't move. The ground shook as Endeavor landed with a fiery explosion. The earth crackled beneath his feet, and heat spread like a wave. His blue eyes bore into Savvatar. Savvatar, his voice was firm, implacable. You won't escape this time. Hawks appeared in the air, his wing feathers fluttering around him. His wings spread as he hovered in the air, ready to attack from any direction. Well, finally you're done running, huh? He said with his usual smile, but his eyes were serious. That's a mistake, friend. Eraserhead appeared silently, his bandages floating around him. His eyes were ready to activate his quirk at any moment. The three heroes were ready. We don't need to talk, Savvatar, Endeavor said, his hands surrounded by fire. This ends here. Savvatar finally turned around. He looked at them, at all three of them. The cobalt blue helmet reflected their images. He didn't move immediately. He let the silence speak for him. A flash of light, 1 second, a moment. Before the three heroes could move, Savvatar had already moved. Boom. Endeavor was thrown backward, his body impacting a concrete wall, shattering it into pieces. The fire around his body went out. Flash. Hawks was rocked by a shockwave. His wings were cut off in the blink of an eye. He didn't know what hit him until he was already falling to the ground. Flash. Eraserhead tried to blink, but his quirk was already deactivated before he could use it. His body was thrown against a lamppost, falling with a dry crunch. Absolute silence. The three heroes lay on the ground, defeated. All in less than a second. Savvatar looked down. There was no hatred in his gaze through his helmet. They always do the same thing, he said coldly. They think they're fast. They think they can catch me. He turned, his body beginning to glow with the white and blue energy of the Brahmastra. The world was moving too slowly for him. Savvatar is gone. The heroes didn't even have time to scream. The world was still searching for Savvatar. But the world wasn't fast enough. Heroes Commission. Main meeting room. The atmosphere was charged with tension. The members of the Hero Commission were gathered around an oval glass table. Men and women in black suits, their expressions arrogant and in control. The main screen on the wall showed images of the recent battle at Musudafu. Endeavor, Hawks and Eraserhead, defeated. In less than a second. Images of the three fallen heroes played on repeat, captured by surveillance drones. Technical personnel analyzed the footage over and over again, trying to find an answer. This is unacceptable, said one of the higher-ranking men, slamming his fist on the table. His face was red with anger. We can't allow that monster to continue humiliating heroes like this. We can't catch it, a woman with black hair and glasses replied, her voice more controlled, but no less tense. It's moving faster than any sensor can detect. Even our motion predictions failed. The future's calculation system can't process something that moves outside of linear time. I don't care, the man shouted again. He's a villain, and villains fall. That's what we do, it's our job. The commission's director, a woman with short hair and a stony expression, stared at the screen without saying anything. She knew the situation was getting out of hand. Savvatar isn't a villain, she said coldly. Her voice made everyone look at her. He's something more, something that should never have existed. Crack. The sound was small, but everyone heard it. The glass tabletop suddenly cracked. It didn't break completely, but a large crack appeared in the center. Silence fell. What was that? One of the men asked, frowning at the crack. A structural failure, another said, looking at the crack in confusion. Then it happened. The world blinked. For a moment, the light in the room flickered, as if reality itself had stopped for a second. The images on the screen froze, and the digital clocks in the room flashed to 0 hours 0 minutes and 0 seconds. Flash. The sound wasn't loud, but its presence was undeniable. A spark of blue and white appeared in the center of the room. There was no flash, just a presence. He was already there. Savvatar. He stood on the glass table, one metal boot pressing against the crack that had appeared earlier. His cobalt blue armor was illuminated with rhythmically pulsing lines of white energy. His helmet was tilted forward, his white eyes glowing with an inhuman light. He was a god walking among mortals. Hell had arrived. No. One of the commission men whispered, his face pale with fear. No, it can't be. He can't be here. But that was it. Good afternoon, Savvatar said, his voice metallic, deep, and filled with an unnatural calm. It wasn't the voice of someone furious. It was the voice of someone who had already made up his mind. Nobody moved. Nobody dared. The commission director stood up slowly, trying to control the situation. She was a strong woman, used to controlling heroes and the media. But even she felt the chill run down her spine. Savvatar, she said in a firm voice. Her control was admirable, but her eyes betrayed her. If you surrender now, we can come to an agreement. You don't need to do this. Savvatar slowly turned his head towards her, his white eyes looking directly into hers. A deal, he said slowly, as if savoring the word. He took a step forward, his metal boot shattering the glass beneath him. You're offering deals, after everything they did. The atmosphere became icy. They're offering deals to the very person they locked away in darkness. Savvatar moved forward slowly, the sound of his footsteps on the cracking glass echoing with each step. They're offering deals to the person whose mother they took. The silence was total. No one said anything. Savvatar stopped in front of the commission director. His helmet was in front of his face. His white eyes stared at her. There are no agreements, he said coldly. Today is Judgment Day. Flash. The next second was absolute chaos. A gust of wind ripped through the room, ripping all the documents and papers into the air. The commission members screamed, the lights flickered, and the screens went dark. When everything returned to normal, 2 of the executives were on the floor. Unconscious. No, not unconscious. Paralyzed. Their bodies were twisted at impossible angles. Bones were broken. The others stared in horror. They didn't see him move. No one saw him. Security. Security. Now, one of the men shouted, backing into the wall. Security. Savvatar bowed his head slowly, his white eyes staring at him. Who are you going to call? The heroes have already defeated. Endeavor, Hawks, Eraserhead. He took another step. The man fell backward, his eyes wide with terror. Please, don't kill me, I was just following orders. The man begged, crawling toward the wall like a trapped mouse. Savvatar crouched down slowly, his helmet tilting toward the man. The brightness of his white eyes reflected in the man's tears. Orders won't save you. His voice was soft, but each word was a sentence. Tell me, how did my mother feel when she realized you had condemned her to die? The man trembled. He didn't respond. He couldn't. Don't worry, I won't kill you. Savvatar stood slowly. His white eyes looked at each member of the commission. The hell you gave me, now belongs to you. Flash. In a split second, every member of the commission was on the ground. Each with broken bones, motionless bodies, looks of absolute terror on their faces. They weren't dead. They were conscious. They could see. They could hear. They could feel. Now, the world will see the heroes who controlled from the shadows. Savvatar walked toward the door, his footsteps echoing calmly. And when the world knows the truth, they will see that I am not the villain. Flash. He went away. The commission's executives screamed in pain, terror, and despair. Not because they were broken, but because they knew their time was up. The world was looking for Savvatar. But now, the world would know the truth. The god of speed is unforgiving. Apartment in America, 7:45 p.m. The small television in the apartment was projecting live images of an event that was shaking the entire world. Journalists surrounded the main building of the Hero Commission. The cameras focused on the destruction, the ambulances parked outside, and the bodies of the executives being carried away on stretchers with faces of absolute panic. The world was watching the fall of the Hero Commission in real time. We're reporting live from the Hero Commission headquarters, where an unprecedented attack has left several top executives incapacitated. Authorities say the attacker has been identified as Savvatar, the same individual responsible for All Might's downfall. The anchor's voice was tense but professional. Eri sat on the couch, hugging her legs to her chest. Her white hair fell over her eyes, but she didn't blink. Her red eyes were glued to the screen. She wasn't scared by what she saw. She wasn't scared by what Savvatar had done. What really terrified her was what the reporters were saying. Authorities are mobilizing all available heroes. A global state of emergency has been declared. The Hero Commission has been exposed, but what's most disturbing isn't just Savvatar's attack, but the massive leak of confidential files. Thousands of internal commission documents have come to light. Eri's body trembled. The files reveal covert operations, hidden assassinations, and the manipulation of public information. Social media is already exploding with comments from outraged users, demanding the resignation of several high-profile heroes. The public is beginning to question the true nature of the Hero Commission. Eri stared at the screen in fear. Not for the commission. Not for the heroes. He was afraid of getting caught. No. No. No, she murmured, clutching her knees tighter to her chest. Her small fingers trembled. They can't catch him. They can't. He knew what would happen if he got caught. They would take it away from him. They would take it away from her, just as Chisaki had taken her from her home. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. She'd learned to hold back her tears. Because in the world of monsters, tears were useless. Then, a spark of blue light appeared in front of her. Flash. The air moved, the breeze making her blink. Eri leaned back in surprise. She recognized him immediately. Savvatar. He wasn't wearing his armor. This time, it was Izuku Midoriya who appeared in front of her. His green hair was disheveled, his face had a couple of fresh cuts on his cheek, but his expression was calm. He showed no signs of fatigue. Izuku, Eri said, her voice shaking, her red eyes filled with fear and relief. They said they're looking for you. They say they're sending all the heroes. They say. He couldn't finish the sentence. His body trembled again. Izuku approached slowly, his gaze softening as he saw little Eri in that state. He knew that feeling. He'd felt it too. The fear of someone taking away what little you had. He crouched down in front of her, putting himself at her level. He looked her straight in the eyes. They won't catch me, Eri. His voice was soft, but firm. Like an unbreakable promise. Eri looked at him. Her lip trembled. How do you know? She asked weakly, her eyes filling with tears. They said the heroes will come for you. All of them. Izuku smiled softly. It wasn't Savvatar's smile. It was Izuku Midoriya's smile. Because the world doesn't understand yet, Eri. He leaned forward and tapped her forehead with his finger. They can't grasp what they can't see. Flash. Eri blinked. Izuku was already sitting on the other side of the room. They didn't even have time to react, he said, crossing his arms and smiling calmly. If the commission couldn't do it, neither can the heroes. Eri felt a moment of relief, but there was still a doubt in her mind. She approached him, tugging at his shirt. But, what if they catch me? She asked, her eyes full of fear. What if they separate me from you? Izuku stopped. Her green eyes softened. That fear Eri felt, he knew it too. It's not going to happen. He leaned toward her and placed a hand on her head, gently stroking her white hair. I won't let anyone touch you. Not heroes, not monsters. No one. Eri closed her eyes. Tears finally fell, but it wasn't out of fear. This time it was relief. Because I knew he was telling the truth. Promise? He asked, looking up, his eyes still watering. Izuku looked at her, and for a moment, the world stopped mattering. There were no heroes, no monsters, no speed, no power, no revenge. There was just him and her. A girl who wanted security. And a child who never had it. I promise, he said in a calm but unwavering voice. You'll never be alone again, Eri. Never. Eri smiled, wiping her tears with the sleeves of her pajamas. That night, the girl who was afraid of monsters felt safe. Elsewhere, online, social media was in chaos. Thousands of files had been released to the public. Leaked documents from the Hero Commission. The labels on the posts were obvious. #Commission Betrayal. #The Truth of Heroes. Thousands of users shared screenshots of the leaked files, including the names of the heroes involved, the covert projects, the information control operations, and the names of the people affected. One of those names was Izuku Midoriya. Did you know the commission killed a child just because he saw something he shouldn't have? This is inhumane. One user posted with an image of the commission's mission archive. The truth was coming out. The world no longer looked to Savvatar as the only enemy. Now they looked to the commission. The heroes they had once admired. The monsters who had operated from the shadows. I want an explanation. Not from Savvatar. From the commission. I want an explanation now, said another post, which was shared more than 10,000 times. The world demanded answers. Apartment 10 p.m. Eri was sleeping on the couch, her breathing soft and calm. Izuku watched her for a moment. He approached, took a blanket, and carefully covered her. He sat in the chair by the window, looking out at the city. The monsters were still out there. Let them come, he said softly, his eyes calmly looking out over the city. I'm not running away anymore. Not anymore. The monsters couldn't reach them. And this time, the world would see the truth. Musudafu Hospital, room 301. The television in the room was showing the news live. Images of the destroyed Hero Commission were on every channel. Reporters talked non-stop, analyzing the situation, showing the faces of the executives who had been paralyzed by Savvatar. The attack on the Hero Commission not only incapacitated several of its top executives, but also leaked thousands of classified files to the public that are now shaking Hero Society. The news anchor kept talking, but Toshinori Yagi couldn't hear her. His eyes were glued to the screen. His face was pale, his hands trembling slightly as he stared at the words appearing at the bottom of the screen. Information Control Operation. Target. Izuku Midoriya. Izuku's name. Izuku Midoriya. No. she whispered, her eyes filled with horror. The whole world knew the truth now. They knew that the Hero Commission had not only manipulated public information, but had also murdered innocent people to maintain peace. And he, Toshinori Yagi, the symbol of peace, had been part of it. "This is my punishment," she murmured, her voice filled with agony. Her body was shaking, her breathing uneven. She couldn't tear her gaze away from the screen. No matter how many times she closed her eyes, the image was still there. The truth. The harsh truth. Leaked documents reveal that Izuku Midoriya, a quirkless boy, was eliminated by the Hero Commission after witnessing All Might's weakness. His mother, Inko Midoriya, was eliminated along with him under the pretext of a gas leak. Crack. Something broke inside Toshinori. Not his body, his spirit. Tears began to fall down her cheeks. She didn't try to stop them. Not this time. "Forgive me, Inko, forgive me, Izuku," he murmured, his eyes closed, his voice filled with pain and regret. He knew no one would hear him. But then, the door to the room opened. Click. Toshinori didn't raise his head. He didn't have the strength to do so. He didn't need to see to know who had arrived. Firm steps. Controlled steps. Aizawa entered first. His gaze was filled with a mixture of disappointment and silent fury. He said nothing. He just stared at Toshinori with those tired, cold eyes he usually used to silence noisy students. But this time, there was no tiredness. There was judgment. Then Nezu came in. The UA director had no expression on his face. His dark eyes were impossible to read, but his posture spoke volumes. He was here to get answers. He wasn't going to accept any excuses. The two of them stopped at the foot of the bed. They said nothing. The silence was worse than any words. Toshinori felt the pressure. He couldn't look at them. He couldn't bear their gaze. "Say it," he murmured, his voice cracking, his eyes still closed. "Just say it. I don't need your forgiveness. I know everything." Silence. "Very well." Nezu's voice cut through the silence with surgical precision. "Then I won't waste any time. I want answers, Yagi." Toshinori slowly opened his eyes. He looked at Nezu, but didn't dare meet his gaze. "I want to know why." Nezu crossed his paws in front of him, his voice calm but sharp. "I want to know why a man who called himself the symbol of peace allowed the commission to target an innocent child." Toshinori felt as if those words pierced him like blades. Aizawa didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His gaze said it all. "I didn't know," Toshinori said, gritting his teeth. "I didn't know they were going to kill him. They told me they'd just monitor him. They just wanted me to keep quiet. I thought they'd keep him safe." Nezu looked at him coldly. "And that was enough for you?" he asked calmly, tilting his head slightly. "Trusting the commission's word, was that enough for you to abandon a child who admired your every step?" Toshinori couldn't answer. His throat closed. The weight of guilt crushed him. "You saw it, true?" Aizawa finally asked. His voice was as sharp as Nezu's, but there was a quieter anger in his words. "Did you see the news about the explosion? You saw it and did nothing." Nezu narrowed his eyes. "You saw it," Nezu concluded, his voice colder than ever. "You knew it was a lie. You knew it wasn't a gas leak. But you did nothing." Toshinori lowered his head. "Yes," he said in a voice that was barely audible. "I saw it, and I did nothing." The words fell like a death sentence. Aizawa clenched his fists. His jaw was so tight it felt like it was about to break. "Coward," was all he said before turning around and walking toward the window, away from Toshinori. Nezu didn't move. His eyes remained fixed on Toshinori, as if he were analyzing every part of him. "You know what the worst part is, Toshinori," Nezu said, his voice lower now, but more dangerous. "It's not that you failed Izuku. It's not that you failed his mother." Toshinori slowly raised his head, looking at Nezu with tear-filled eyes. "The worst thing is that you failed yourself." The silence was absolute. Nezu closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and then turned around to walk toward the door. His steps were slow but steady. "The world already knows the truth, Toshinori," Nezu said without looking at him. "The commission has fallen, and when monsters fall, the world looks to heroes for answers." He paused at the door, looking at Toshinori one last time. You will be the first answer the world will demand. The door closed. Aizawa didn't move. He stood at the window, looking out at the city, watching the flashing lights of helicopters and news cameras. The worst part of all, Yagi, Aizawa said without looking at him, is that he keeps waiting for an apology. And you weren't even able to give it to him in person. Toshinori broke down. Not like All Might, not like the hero, like Toshinori Yagi. Her body shook, and tears fell like a waterfall. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, she said, her voice breaking, covering her face with her hands. But there was no one there to hear his apologies. And in the distance, a blue flash crossed the night sky. Savvatar needed no apologies. Savvatar didn't need forgiveness. The world was seeking justice. And the world no longer needed heroes. Abandoned Industrial Zone 2:35 a.m. The atmosphere was cold and silent. The streetlights flickered weakly, illuminating the long shadows of the rusty metal structures with a yellowish glow. A place forgotten by the world. 4 figures moved among the shadows. Katsuki Bakugo, Nito Monoma, Eijiro Kirishima, Hitoshi Shinso. They had made a decision. This time he won't get away from us, Bakugo said through gritted teeth, his red eyes filled with determination. Anger and conviction mingled in his voice. This time we're going to stop him. Shinso adjusted his brain monitoring equipment. The microphone in his mask would capture his voice and Savvatar's response. All he had to do was ask him a question. If he says one word, he's finished, Shinso said calmly, but there was a nervousness in his eyes. He knew what was at stake. They weren't facing a common villain. Monoma clenched his hands. He'd copied Shinso's quirk before arriving, but he'd also prepared to copy Bakugo and Kirishima's quirks if necessary. He felt confident. Once I catch him, I'll copy his quirk. Monoma smiled, his usual arrogance shining on his face. If he can be faster than light, so can I. Kirishima pounded his fists together, hardening his skin. Let's not underestimate each other, guys. We know he's fast, but no matter how fast he is, no one can take on 4 of us working together. You damn idiot, we're not here to give inspirational speeches. Bakugo yelled, but he didn't deny it. For the first time, they were all in agreement. The plan was in motion. 2:42 a.m. Flash. A blue and white flash crossed the industrial area. The wind whipped through the dry leaves and rusty cans. The presence was felt before they could see it. Savvatar. He appeared in the middle of the street, standing, his head slightly bowed. His cobalt blue armor lit up with white energy seeping through its cracks. The white eyes of his helmet shone like 2 beacons in the darkness. And most importantly, it was motionless. There it is. Shinso immediately prepared himself. There was no time to waste. Savvatar didn't move. He showed no signs of surprise or caution. He already knew they were there. Why are you doing this? Shinso asked calmly. Silence. A heartbeat. 2 heartbeats. And then, Savvatar spoke. Because I'm punishing the guilty. His metallic voice boomed like thunder. Shinso smiled. I got it, Shinso shouted as his mind control activated. Savvatar stood still. The white eyes in his helmet flickered, as if the light inside them had gone out. Now, Monoma, do it, Shinso shouted, a victorious smile on his face. Monoma ran up to Savvatar, tapping him on the shoulder with confidence. Quirk copied, he exclaimed, with a triumphant smile. Now I am speed itself. Silence. Nothing happened. Huh. Monoma blinked as he looked at his hands. What's going on? Why can't I feel it? Then he felt it. The world became distorted. No, not the world. Your perception. His body. No. Monoma screamed as he fell to the ground, his hands shaking uncontrollably. His muscles spasmed violently, his nerves screamed in pain. It was as if his body was being forced to move at infinite speed, but his mind couldn't keep up. Monoma, Kirishima shouted, running toward him, stealing his body to protect him. Crack. Savvatar moved. No, it didn't move. I was already there. A blue flash appeared in front of Kirishima. The energy knocked him back, his feet leaving marks on the ground. Bakugo wasted no time. He raised his hands and launched a blast directly at Savvatar's helmet. Die, you damn idiot. Bakugo yelled, his eyes filled with fury. Flash. The explosion didn't hit anything. Savvatar was no longer there. What the? Bakugo looked around, his breath ragged. He couldn't see him. He couldn't feel him. Savvatar was behind him. You're strong, Bakugo, Savvatar said quietly, almost a whisper. But your strength doesn't matter if you can't see the world in motion. Flash. The world slowed down. For Savvatar, seconds felt like eternities. He looked at the 4 students. They were no different than him. Kids who wanted to be heroes. Kids who wanted to prove their worth. Children, he said in a tone of resignation. He took a step toward Monoma, who was still writhing on the ground. He didn't touch him. He didn't have to. He'd already learned his lesson. He took a step toward Kirishima, his body hardened, ready to take a blow. But Savvatar didn't strike. He took a step toward Shinso. He looked at the boy who had tried to trap him with his mind control. Nice try, Savvatar said, tilting his head slightly. But your bending only works if we share the same perception of time. Flash. He appeared in front of Bakugo, looking him straight in the eyes. There was no hatred, only sadness. You and I. We're the same, Savvatar said, looking at him deeply. Bakugo saw his reflection in Savvatar's helmet. Always trying to prove a point. But let me tell you something, Bakugo. When you stop chasing after other people's approval, that's when you realize it doesn't matter. Flash. Savvatar reappeared in the middle of the street, back where it all began. The world resumed. Shinso gasped, his mental control broken. Monoma writhed on the ground, unable to move. Kirishima looked around, confused by what had just happened. Bakugo lowered his arms. Why didn't you attack us? Bakugo asked, breathing heavily. Sweat dripped down his face. Savvatar looked at him from a distance. Because I was once like you, he replied calmly. Kids who believe they can change the world with strength and determination. This is just the beginning, Kachan. Flash. The world slowed down again. Savvatar moved toward the horizon, leaving the 4 students behind. There was no hatred in his actions. Only patience. They weren't heroes, just children. And children shouldn't bear the wrath of a god. Abandoned Industrial Zone 3:10 a.m. The silence was absolute. The wind blew gently between the rusted metal structures. The world felt slower than ever. 4 students were standing, defeated, but not by blows. For the truth, Monoma sat on the ground, eyes open, breathing heavily while his hands still trembled from the energy surge he'd felt. He didn't understand what had happened. He'd copied many quirks before, but none had destroyed him like this. Shinso leaned against a wall, staring at his own hands. His mind control had broken. He didn't understand how. It had never failed before. Kirishima was silent. His hardened body was beginning to relax. Nothing could harden him against the truth. But the one who was the quietest was Bakugo Katsuki. Bakugo's silence was unusual. Her eyes were open, but not looking at anyone. They were fixed in the direction where Savvatar had disappeared. The echo of his words still resonated in her mind. This is just the beginning, Kachan. Kachan. The nickname only one person in the entire world had ever used to refer to him. A name he hadn't heard since he was 14. A name that had belonged to a boy without a quirk. Izuku Midoriya. No. No. It can't be. Bakugo muttered, taking a step back, his body tense. It can't be him. It can't be. The world stopped in his mind. The pieces began to fall into place. Every moment, every word, every glance. He remembered the day Izuku looked at him with those hopeful eyes. Do you think I can be a hero too, Kachan? He remembered what he did. The shoving, the hitting, the insults. You're a failure, Deku. You'll never be a hero. He remembered the time he burned his notebook. The days he ignored her tears. The days when she thought she was better than him. And then he remembered the news. The news she'd seen on TV when she was 14. A gas leak that had killed Inko Midoriya and her son, Izuku. I had thought Izuku was dead. But now I knew. He wasn't dead. Izuku never died. It became something more. No. It can't be. Bakugo bit his lip, feeling the trembling in his hands. It wasn't fear. It was guilt. No. 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 It can't be Izuku. It can't be. No. He shouted, pounding the ground with his fists, causing a small explosion to shake the earth. Kirishima looked at him immediately. Hey, Bakugo, calm down. We'll face him again. We can do this. She tried to calm him down, but her voice didn't have the same enthusiasm as always. Bakugo slowly raised his head. His eyes were dark. You don't understand, Kirishima, he said, his voice low, but laden with an emotion no one had ever heard from him before. We can't face him. Shinso looked up, confused. What are you saying? Shinso asked. We know their plan now. We just have to be smarter next time. You don't understand. Bakugo yelled, his eyes filled with fury, but this time, the fury wasn't for them. It was for himself. Kirishima took a step back, surprised by Bakugo's burst of emotion. What don't we understand, Bakugo? Monoma asked, still trembling on the ground. If you have something to say, just say it. Bakugo stood up slowly. He looked at each of them. Kirishima, Shinso, Monoma. He looked at his friends and comrades. And then he said it. I'm Izuku. Silence. The world stopped moving. What the? Kirishima asked, his eyes wide. What did you say? Bakugo closed his eyes and took a deep breath. There was no reason to hide it anymore. There was no escaping the truth. Savvatar, it's Izuku Midoriya, he said in the lowest voice they'd ever heard from him. Each word felt like a stone lodged in their throats. The impact was immediate. Shinso stopped moving. Monoma stopped breathing for a second. Kirishima went completely still. No. That doesn't make sense, Monoma muttered, trying to deny reality. Izuku Midoriya is dead. We all saw the news. He died in an explosion that the commission tried to pass off as an accident involving his mother. He didn't die, Bakugo shouted, his face filled with rage. But it wasn't rage at Monoma. It was rage at himself. He never died, you idiot. The commission killed him. They broke him. Shinso's eyes snapped open. Wait. Are you saying that? Shinso understood immediately. He didn't need any more details. Are you saying the commission turned it into this? Bakugo didn't respond. No. Kirishima muttered, his eyes wide with disbelief. It can't be true. Why would they do that? The silence said it all. Everyone knew the answer. Because peace came at a price. And Izuku paid the price. Shinso dropped to the ground, covering his face with both hands. All this time, he murmured, his voice breaking. Kirishima clenched his fists tightly. His eyes filled with tears he didn't want to show. But, if that's true, then, everything we've done. Monoma looked at his hands, trembling. We attacked him. We tried to catch him. Just like they did. The silence was deadly. Nobody said anything. Bakugo looked at the horizon. It wasn't his fault, he murmured, his voice thick with weariness. For the first time, he seemed defeated. This is all our fault. My fault. The commission, but also ours. Everyone abandoned him. Kirishima looked at Bakugo with eyes full of pain. What are we going to do now, Bakugo? Bakugo remained silent. He had no answer. I don't know, he admitted. It was the first time he'd admitted not knowing what to do. But then he remembered Izuku's words. This is just the beginning, Kachan. Bakugo clenched his fists. His eyes were filled with determination. UA main meeting room. The room was filled with tension. The air felt heavier than usual. The UA teachers were gathered around a large conference table. Nezu sat in the center, his eyes narrowed, his paws clasped in front of his face, analyzing every detail. To her left, Aizawa stood with his arms crossed. His face was more tired than ever, but his eyes were sharper than usual. There was no room for patience this time. Present Mike, Midnight, Smintos, and Snipe were also present. They all had the same expressions of concern and confusion. It wasn't just about Savvatar anymore. It was about the truth that had been revealed. In front of them sat 4 students. Katsuki Bakugo, Eijiro Kirishima, Nito Monoma, Hitoshi Shinso. The 4 of them looked tired, worn out both physically and mentally. It wasn't just from the fight with Savvatar. It was from the truth they had learned. A truth that outweighed any battle. Explain it to me again, Nezu said in his calm but authoritative voice. His gaze fell on the 4 of them, but especially on Bakugo. What happened? How did you find him? And why did you think you could face him alone? The four of them lowered their gaze, as if they were being judged in a courtroom. None of them wanted to be the first to speak. "We don't have all day, guys," Aizawa added, his voice cold. "If you want silence, I can give you an indefinite suspension while you decide what to say." That was enough to make them react. Kirishima said, raising his head. His face showed the guilt he felt. "I thought we could catch him. I thought if we were fast, if we worked together, we could stop him. But it wasn't like that, it wasn't even close." "I know," Aizawa said, his eyes closed. "Tell me something I don't know." Kirishima clenched his fists. "There was nothing we could do. He saw us before we even realized it. He already knew we were there." Nezu nodded slowly. "That's to be expected from someone who doesn't perceive time the same way we do." Monoma's eyes snapped open. "That's what happened," he said, raising his voice. His face showed frustration and disbelief. "That's why I couldn't copy his quirk. It's not just a quirk. It's not something you can copy." All the teachers looked at him. "What does that mean, Monoma?" Snipe asked, tilting his head. "What did you feel?" Monoma looked at his shaking hands. The memory of the pain was still fresh. "It's not like copying a normal quirk. When I touched Savvatar, I didn't feel the usual connection. I felt..." His breathing became ragged as he searched for words. "It felt like my body was trying to move faster than my mind could process. Like every nerve in my body was being forced to move at the speed of light." Midnight frowned. "Does that mean her power isn't based on a common quirk?" "No." Monoma shook his head. "It's not just a quirk. It's something more. It's like he himself is part of the speed force. I couldn't control it. My body nearly destroyed itself trying to match it." Nezu closed his eyes, processing the information. "Interesting. So it's not a quirk at all. It's a state of existence." Silence filled the room. "Something to say, Bakugo?" Aizawa asked, looking directly at the explosive student. "You've been silent this whole time." Everyone looked at Bakugo. His body was stiff. His eyes were dark. He didn't look up, but everyone sensed something was wrong. "I know who it is," he finally said, in the lowest voice they'd ever heard him use. The world stopped. "What did you say, Bakugo?" Aizawa asked in a deeper tone. Bakugo clenched his fists. "I know who Savvatar is." Nezu opened his eyes slowly, looking at him intently. "And who is it?" he asked calmly. He knew the answer. The silence was absolute. Bakugo's eyes began to fill with a mixture of guilt and anger. He didn't want to say it. But he couldn't lie anymore. Not after all of this. "It's Izuku," she said, her voice breaking. Her words fell like a hammer on the room. Aizawa's eyes widened. Midnight covered her mouth with her hand. Cemento stopped moving. "What?" Present Mike asked, unable to process what he'd heard. How is that possible? Izuku Midoriya died." "He didn't die," Bakugo said through gritted teeth. "The commission made him disappear. They destroyed him." Nezu narrowed his eyes, watching Bakugo's every move. "And you knew?" Nezu asked, his voice soft but deadly. "How long have you known, Bakugo?" Bakugo squeezed his eyes shut. "Since last night." Nezu said nothing for a few seconds. He stood motionless, his mind calculating every possibility. "So now we know," he said finally, his voice firmer than ever. His eyes flashed with a dangerous intensity. "Savvatar isn't a villain." Everyone looked at Nezu. "He's a broken child. A child who was abandoned in the darkness." The silence in the room was heavier than ever. "Nezu, what are we going to do?" Midnight asked, her voice shaking. "If the world finds out Izuku Midoriya is alive?" "They won't find out," Nezu said, his voice colder than ever. "I won't allow it." Everyone looked at Nezu, surprised. "If the world knows Izuku is Savvatar, the world's heroes will try to hunt him down until the end of time. And I won't allow that." Nezu looked from one person to another, his eyes as dark as night. "This time, we won't let him down." Aizawa frowned. "And how do you plan to do that, Nezu?" Nezu looked at the four students. "We're not going to hunt Savvatar. We're going to save Izuku Midoriya." Silence. "And how are we going to save him?" Aizawa asked. "I will remember Bakugo. With someone who never gave up on him." His gaze was clear. "You, Bakugo." Bakugo's eyes snapped open. "What?" he asked, his body tense. Like it or not, Bakugo, Nezu said with a light smile. You're his anchor. And this time, you won't let it get lost in the darkness. The silence in the room was more oppressive than any scream. Everyone's eyes were on Bakugo. But Bakugo wasn't looking at them. His gaze was fixed on the ground. His hands were clenched so tightly that his knuckles were white. He couldn't look at anyone. Because I knew it wasn't true. Nezu had the wrong idea. He was wrong about his relationship with Izuku Midoriya. I don't know how to do it, Bakugo muttered, his voice as weak as anyone had ever heard him use. The explosive, arrogant, and unstoppable Bakugo Katsuki had finally lost his spark. I don't know how to bring him back. Her shoulders shook. It wasn't out of anger, it was out of shame. What did you say, Bakugo? Aizawa asked, his voice no longer cold and critical, it was softer now. Bakugo slowly raised his head, his face filled with a mixture of guilt, anger, and despair. His red eyes were wet, but he didn't cry. He couldn't allow himself to cry. I don't know how to bring him back, she said, her voice shaking. I don't know how to talk to him. All the teachers fell silent, because they were hoping to know exactly why. Bakugo took a deep breath, gritting his teeth tightly. Because I left him behind, she screamed, slamming both hands on the table. The blow was so hard it creaked. I ignored him. I humiliated him. I treated him like dirt just to feel strong. And now they're telling me I'm their anchor, me. His voice broke. How am I going to save someone I destroyed? Her breathing was uneven. She seemed to be gasping for air. Kirishima lowered his head. He didn't say anything, but his face showed that he understood. He couldn't possibly know what Bakugo was feeling. Nezu closed his eyes and took a deep breath. That's the right question, Bakugo, Nezu said calmly. His gaze was no longer cold. It was softer now. Because, for the first time, you're facing the truth. Bakugo looked at Nezu, confused. Mistakes can't be undone, Bakugo, Nezu continued, slowly opening his eyes. But you can choose not to make them again. It doesn't matter how much you hurt him before. What matters is what you do now. Bakugo's eyes slowly opened. So what do I do now? He asked, his voice filled with doubt. Nezu smiled slightly. First, you stop running. Bakugo gritted his teeth, but said nothing. He couldn't argue. Because, for the first time in his life, he knew Nezu was right. Melissa Shield Lab 3:25 a.m. The blue light from the computer screen illuminated the dark room. The sound of the computer's fans and the constant tapping of keys filled the air. Melissa Shield didn't stop. He hadn't slept in 3 days. The eyes beneath his glasses were surrounded by deep dark circles, his hair was messy, and there was an empty coffee cup on the side of the table. But he didn't stop. On the screen, a 3D simulation model slowly rotated. It represented an infinite space filled with tangled timelines, a web of intertwined possibilities. At the center of the web, he stood. Savvatar. Or, more accurately, Izuku Midoriya. Melissa stared at the simulation, her eyes fixed, almost hypnotized by the interlocking movements of the timelines. The possibilities were endless, but only one of them led to success. 3%. Melissa whispered, looking at the percentage bar at the bottom of the screen. It was the best she'd managed. 3% success rate. That's enough, she said, her voice breaking, her resolve stronger than ever. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand over his face. He felt tears burning in his eyes. Not from sadness. Not from fear. It was from fatigue and pressure. But he couldn't stop. I can't fail now, he murmured, his eyes closed. I can't fail. He looked at the corner of the screen. There was a folder of open files. Messages from Izuku Midoriya. Melissa clicked on the folder and saw the long list of messages she'd exchanged with Izuku when they were both part of a quirkless support forum. The forum where they'd both met. Where they leaned on each other. It doesn't matter that you don't have a quirk. You can be stronger than that. Izuku had written in a message. Melissa smiled slightly. That's what you told me, he murmured, looking at the message. Now I'm the one who has to remind you. Her gaze hardened. She wasn't a hero. She wasn't a fighter, but she was a creator. I'm going to get to you, Izuku, she said firmly. Quirkless to quirkless. I'm going to catch up with you. His hand moved quickly across the keyboard. He adjusted the equations, modified the simulation parameters, and started a new iteration. The numbers began to change slowly. 3.2%. 3.5%. 3.7%. It wasn't enough, but it didn't matter. A 3% chance of success was all he needed. It's not about probabilities, he said with a tired smile. It's about certainty. Flashback. Forum posts Izuku. It doesn't matter how many times we fail. We only need to succeed once, right? Melissa. Yes. Just once. And that once will change everything. Present Melissa's lab. That's right, Izuku, he said, looking at the simulation. The simulation ended with a 3.8% chance of success. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't enough, but it was possible. I'm going to catch you, she said, her heart pounding, not because she felt safe, but because she knew she couldn't miss. He looked at the screen one last time before typing his last command. The message was sent. Message sent. Izuku, I know you can hear me. No matter how fast you are, you can't outrun me. I'm not leaving you behind. Not this time. In the Speed Force, a flash of light. The blue and white world of the Speed Force was calm, but something different appeared. A spark. Savvatar, Izuku Midoriya, opened his eyes inside his helmet. He blinked slowly. No, it can't be, he said in a trembling voice. The message floated in front of him, as if the world itself were showing it to him. I'm not leaving you behind, not this time, Flash. The world shook. Savvatar looked at his hands. His body was shaking, not from power, but from something else. Melissa, he murmured, closing his eyes. For the first time in centuries, the god of speed felt something he had forgotten. Hope. Melissa Shield Lab 4:12 a.m. The world outside the lab was dark and silent, but inside, everything was chaos. The computer screens displayed a complex equation that flashed incessantly. The formula for the timeless bubble. The numbers shifted constantly, readjusting with each iteration of the simulation. The concept was simple in theory, but almost impossible in practice. Push gravity to the limit, to the point where time stops. A space where neither speed nor time matter. A perfect refuge for trapping someone who moves faster than light. To reach Savvatar to Izuku. Melissa Shield leaned toward the screen, her eyes tired but focused. The dark circles under her eyes had deepened, and her hair was messy, tied in a loose ponytail. She hadn't slept in days. She hadn't eaten anything but coffee and protein bars. But she was close. I can't fail now, he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. Each line of code was a piece of the prison. But not a prison to trap him. It was a prison to reach him. The progress bar blinked. 99%. Melissa took a deep breath. Just a little more. Just a little more. Come on. Come on. Just a little more, he murmured as his fingers flew over the keyboard. Then, everything stopped. Not the system. Not the screens. The world. Flash. A blue and white flash lit up the room for a split second. The air trembled. Static electricity made her hair stand on end. The whole world seemed to gasp. Melissa froze in her chair, her fingers still on the keyboard. Her breathing slowed, her eyes widened. She felt it before she saw it. The presence. He was there. Savvatar, Izuku, his friend. He didn't appear. He didn't enter. He was already there. Standing in the center of the lab, surrounded by a blue and white glow. The glow faded, but the energy around him still vibrated. Melissa felt her heart begin to beat faster, not out of fear, not this time. For the first time, he had come to see her, not to run, not to escape, to see her. Savvatar looked at her. He didn't say anything, he didn't move, he just watched her. The white eyes of his helmet looked directly at her. But then, something changed. He knelt, and the armor's gears shifted. The armor segments slowly separated, like pieces of metal floating in the air. Plate by plate, Savvatar's armor crumbled. The mask was the last to fall. The helmet split in two, revealing a face Melissa hadn't seen in years. Izuku Midoriya. His green hair was messy, falling over his forehead. His face was more defined, more mature. He was no longer a child. There were scars on his cheek and a look in his eyes that only someone who had been in the dark could have. Melissa stood still. Izuku. Her voice cracked. She said it. His name. Not Savvatar. Izuku. Izuku slowly raised his head. His green eyes looked directly at her. Melissa. His voice was deeper than before, but inside it was still the boy who had shared messages with her. Melissa felt her whole body tremble. Her hands covered her mouth. She couldn't believe it. No. It can't be, he said as he stood up from the chair. His legs felt weak, but he took a step forward. It's you, it really is you. Izuku nodded slowly. It's me. His words broke the barrier between them. Melissa darted forward, running toward him, tears in her eyes. She didn't care if he was dangerous. She didn't care if he was Savvatar. She only saw Izuku. And hugged him. It's you, you didn't get lost. She cried, her arms wrapping tightly around him. Her head sank into his chest, and tears flowed wildly. Izuku didn't move at first. He didn't know what to do. He wasn't used to being touched. But then, something changed. His arms moved, slowly. And he hugged her back. I'm here, he said, his voice shaking, his eyes slowly closing. I'm sorry, Melissa. I'm so sorry. She cried harder. It doesn't matter, Izuku. It doesn't matter, she said through tears, her voice thick with emotion. You're here. You're here. That's all that matters. The two stayed like that for what seemed like an eternity. A god of speed who had raced for eternity. A creator who never stopped searching for it. Together, at last. Melissa wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her sweater. Her eyes were red from tears, but her smile was genuine. She hadn't felt this much peace in 2 years. Izuku was sitting in one of the lab chairs, staring at the timeless bubble screen. His gaze was lost, but his expression was calm. So this is your solution, he said, pointing at the simulation on the screen. Melissa turned to him, with a tired smile. Yes, it's the only way. Izuku stared at the equation for a long moment, using gravity to stop time. He murmured, his eyes darting back and forth as he analyzed the formula. If you create a point of infinite gravity, time stops completely. Melissa nodded. Yes. That's what I try to do. Izuku frowned. To catch me. Melissa immediately shook her head. Her face was serious. Not to catch you, he said firmly. His gaze grew even more intense. To reach you. Izuku looked at her in surprise. I'm not trying to stop you, Izuku, she said, tears welling up in her eyes again. I'm trying to reach you. To reach the guy the first used to talk to on those forums. Izuku looked at his hands. He fell silent. That boy doesn't exist anymore, Melissa, she said, her voice lower than ever. He died in the darkness. Melissa didn't move. She took a step toward him. No, he's right in front of me. The world stopped, and this time, it wasn't about speed. It was because Melissa's words pierced the invisible armor he had built in his heart. Izuku looked up. For the first time, he didn't feel alone. So, will you catch me? He asked, his voice filled with doubt. A doubt only a scared child could have. Melissa smiled. Yes, he said with complete certainty. No matter how fast you run, Izuku. No matter where you go. I'll always catch up. For the first time, Izuku Midoriya smiled. Then run, Melissa, he said, with a soft, peaceful smile. Run as fast as you can. The blue light from the lab screen was dim, almost warm. But the conversation taking place in that space was anything but warm. It was raw, painful, and sincere. Izuku Midoriya sat in front of Melissa's shield, wearing a white t-shirt and dark pants, with battle scars visible on his face and hands. There were no barriers between them now. Melissa sat across from him, her elbows resting on the table, her hands clasped together, staring at Izuku with all the focus she could muster. She was no longer the genius calculating impossible equations. Now, she was simply Melissa Shield, his friend. Izuku looked down at the ground. He couldn't meet her gaze as he spoke. The words were too heavy. It all started with him. His voice was deep, but not metallic this time. It was his real voice. The voice of a boy who had suffered more than anyone could imagine. All might. Melissa didn't say anything. She let him talk. Izuku took a deep breath, his shoulders rising and falling slowly. I found him by accident, he said, his eyes staring into space, as if he were seeing the memories before him. I wasn't looking for him. I was just dreaming. I thought if I could ask him directly. If I could talk to him face to face. His hands clenched into fists. I thought maybe you'd tell me there was hope for me. Her voice cracked a little. I thought you'd tell me something different. Something no one else had told me. Something no one else dared tell me. Melissa leaned forward, her eyes filled with concern. She knew what was coming. She knew this was the wound that had never healed. Izuku lifted his head and looked at her for the first time. His eyes were filled with pain. Not fury. Not revenge. Just grief. But instead, her voice trembled, and she squeezed her eyes shut, as if she were trying to erase the memory. She said, "You better give up. Without a quirk, you can't be a hero." Absolute silence. Melissa felt her heart break. I knew that story. I'd read about it in the archives, though it didn't mention All Might's words. But hearing it from Izuku, that was different. With those words, he destroyed me. Izuku took a deep breath, his body trembling slightly. It wasn't a hit. It wasn't a fight. It was like everything I was, everything I wanted to be, crumbled in a single moment. Melissa felt a tear slide down her cheek. She didn't bother wiping it away. It wasn't just her friend. It was herself. I didn't go home that day, Izuku continued, his voice so low that Melissa had to lean in to hear. I went to the tallest building I could find and climbed onto the roof. I thought maybe if everything was so broken, I didn't have to put up with it anymore. Melissa felt the air escape from her lungs. But then I thought of my mom, Izuku said, his eyes closed. His face broke into a small, sad smile. I thought about her face when I found myself there. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it, not because I wanted to live, but because I didn't want her to suffer. Melissa covered her mouth with both hands. She didn't want to interrupt him. She didn't want to talk. I thought things could only get better from there. Izuku laughed bitterly, hanging his head. I thought that was the lowest point of my life. Melissa knew it wasn't. But then, the accident. Izuku looked down at his own hands, observing the scars on his fingers. As if he was seeing something no one else could. The fire. The gas leak. The hero commission. Everyone said the same thing. Everyone said it was an accident. His breathing became heavier. His body began to shake with anger. It wasn't an accident, Melissa. He lifted his head, his eyes filled with suppressed fury. They came for me, because I had seen the truth. Because I saw that All Might wasn't invincible. And that was dangerous for them. Melissa gritted her teeth. There was nothing she could say. She already knew all of that from the leaked files. But hearing Izuku experience it, that was different. Izuku took a deep breath and calmed down. I ended up trapped in the Speed Force, he said, his eyes staring into space. I don't know how it happened. I didn't understand it at the time. It all happened so fast. But what I do know is, time doesn't move there. Melissa looked at him in horror. At first, I tried to escape. Izuku stared at the ground, his eyes lost in his memories. I ran and ran, but no matter how hard I tried, I never got anywhere. His hands began to shake. And then, time stopped having meaning. Melissa leaned forward, her eyes filling with tears. How long, Izuku? She asked, her voice shaking. How long were you there? Izuku looked at her with eyes filled with painful truth. Centuries, he said softly. I spent centuries trapped in the Speed Force. The world felt colder. I saw every version of me that tried to get out. Her voice trembled again. Some versions of me saved my mom, but the universe erased them. Some went crazy. Some just gave up. Melissa leaned toward him, her eyes filling with tears. But not you, she said, her voice full of strength. You didn't give up. Izuku remained silent. No, he finally said, closing his eyes. I didn't give up, because there was something else. Something that kept pushing me forward. Something that told me I couldn't stop. Melissa squinted at him. What was it? He asked. Izuku looked her straight in the eyes. You, he said with a broken smile. Your message. Our conversation the day before the fire. No matter how many times you fail, you only need to succeed once. Melissa stood still. I thought about it again and again. Izuku lowered his head, smiling sadly. I thought about you waiting at that mall for our date. I thought about the promise I made to you. I thought about all of it, and that's what kept me going. Melissa started crying again. She couldn't hold it back. She leaned toward him and hugged him with all her might. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Izuku," she cried, her voice breaking. "I shouldn't have left you alone." Izuku hugged her back. His heart felt lighter than ever. "You're not alone, Melissa," he said softly, with a genuine smile. "And neither am I." And for the first time in centuries, Izuku Midoriya felt human again. Izuku disappeared in a flash of white and blue light, but Melissa knew she could get to him. Musudafu Hospital, 9:12 a.m. The air in the room was thick. Not from heat or humidity, but from tension. Toshinori Yagi sat up in the hospital bed. His frail body was covered by a white hospital gown, and his gaze was fixed on the window. But he couldn't see the city. He wasn't seeing anything. His mind was trapped in his own mistakes. "Uncle," Melissa's voice cut through the silence in the room. Toshinori turned his head slowly. Seeing Melissa standing in the doorway, her hands in her jacket pockets, his expression immediately changed. The discomfort was evident on his face. He knew why she was there. "Melissa, I didn't expect to see you here so soon." She tried to smile, but it was forced. Melissa closed the door behind her. Without saying a word, she walked toward him. Her gaze was fixed on his face, serious, calculating. This wasn't the same Melissa who used to admire him. This was a woman on a mission. "I want to ask you something," he said, his voice firm. Not a plea, a demand. Toshinori took a deep breath. He knew he couldn't escape this. He knew the conversation he'd been avoiding had finally arrived. "Sure, Melissa, whatever you need," he replied, trying to sound warm. Melissa stopped in front of him. "Do you think someone without a quirk can be a hero?" Toshinori blinked. His body tensed. That question. It wasn't a new question. He didn't answer immediately. He tried to think of the right way to say it. "Melissa, that's complicated," he said, his voice shaking, unable to look at her directly. "The world isn't as simple as we'd like. Quirks have become the norm, and being a hero without one is difficult." Melissa stared at him. "Difficult," he repeated the word with disdain. "Difficult doesn't mean impossible, Toshinori." Toshinori felt cornered. He looked away, his hands clenched on the bed sheet. "Melissa, I don't want to discourage you, but," her words broke off a little. "Not everyone can be a hero." Melissa clenched her fists. "Not everyone," he repeated, taking a step forward. "But I do." Toshinori looked up. He saw the determination in her eyes. That same spark he'd seen in Izuku years ago, and that made him hesitate. "Melissa, you're brilliant," he said in the softest voice he could muster. "You're a genius. You're capable of incredible things. You don't need to be a hero to change the world." Melissa closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. "You're not answering me, Toshinori." He opened his eyes slowly, and now there was fire in them. "Do you think someone without a quirk can be a hero?" Absolute silence. Toshinori lowered his head. His shadow covered his eyes. "No," he said in a low but clear voice. "I don't think they can." Melissa's world was shaken. It was like a blade piercing his heart. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She stayed completely still. Her breathing slowed, became more controlled. She wasn't going to cry. She wasn't going to show weakness. Serious. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a bitter laugh. "So that's what you think," he said, looking at Toshinori with a mixture of disappointment and anger. "After everything we've been through? After everything we've seen? You, of all people, think that?" Toshinori snapped his head up. "Melissa, it's not like that. I just—" "No, no," she interrupted, pointing her finger at him. "You chose those words. Don't hide behind excuses. You said what you really think. You'd better give up." Toshinori felt the blow. Because he knew those were the same words he'd used with Izuku. Guilt hit him hard. "Melissa, I just want to protect you. I don't want you to hurt yourself trying to be something the world will never accept." Melissa gritted her teeth. She took a step back, her head held high. She was no longer the little girl who had once needed his approval. "I don't need the world to accept me." His voice was firm, almost unwavering. "I don't need the hero's approval, nor yours, Toshinori." Toshinori looked at her with eyes full of surprise. "What are you going to do, Melissa?" he asked, his voice shaking. Melissa turned toward the door. She paused before leaving. She didn't look back. I'm going to show you, she said, her voice filled with determination. I'm going to show you that a quirkless girl can save Izuku. That I can save him. And when I do, you're going to be there to see it. Toshinori felt a chill run through his body. Melissa, please, he murmured, his voice weak. But Melissa didn't stop. Don't tell me to give up, she said in a cutting voice. Firm. Powerful. Because I already gave up once when he needed me, and I won't do it again. The door closed with a loud click. Toshinori was left alone in the room. His body was motionless. His mind does not. No, not again, she murmured, her eyes filling with tears. Not again. Main Street. Outside the hospital, Melissa walked along the sidewalk, her breathing heavy. The cold morning wind hit her face. I'm not going to give up, she said aloud, tears finally falling down her cheeks. But this time, they weren't from sadness. They were from rage and determination. Her eyes looked up at the sky. She didn't know where Izuku was at that moment, but she knew he would see her. Izuku, she said, wiping her tears with her sleeve. I'm going to catch you. I'm going to save you, and it doesn't matter how many times I fail. He turned toward his lab. It was time to finish the timeless bubble. Not as a tool to hunt him down. Not as a prison. It was the space where she would finally reach him. I'm quirkless, just like you, Izuku, he said with a determined smile, clenching his fists. And together, we're going to show the world that they should never tell us to give up. The wind blew harder. The world kept moving at full speed. But Melissa didn't stop, because speed doesn't matter when you have a goal. You don't need to be fast, you just need to be consistent. UA Oficina de Nezu, 2:35 p.m. Nezu's office was quiet, but never silent. The sound of computer keys tapped softly, the ticking of a clock on the wall marked the passage of time, and the sweet aroma of freshly brewed tea filled the room. But the atmosphere was tense. Nezu, the headmaster of UA, sat in his chair, legs crossed, intently observing the person in front of him. Melissa Shield. The girl didn't look like the bright, optimistic student who had visited UA in the past. There were deep dark circles under her eyes. Her glasses were slightly crooked, and her hair was messy. But there was something about her he couldn't ignore. Determination. Melissa sat across from him, a notebook full of equations and schematic drawings spread out on the table. Her hands were steady, but her eyes were even steadier. Nezu narrowed his eyes as he watched her. He'd seen that look before, in Izuku Midoriya's file. Melissa, Nezu said, his tone calm but with the precision of a scalpel. Before we talk about your proposal, I want to understand something. Why are you doing this? Melissa looked up, her jaw clenched. Because it's the right thing to do, she replied forcefully. Because he would do it for me. Nezu didn't respond immediately. He knew there was something more. There's always something more. That's not enough, Nezu said, resting one of his front paws on the table. His gaze hardened. People don't move the world with vague ideals. Tell me the truth, Melissa. Why are you here? What really motivates you? The silence lasted. Melissa closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Because I failed him. His voice was softer this time, but each word carried weight. Because I failed him when he needed me most. Nezu pricked up his ears. Explain yourself, she said, her voice calm but inquisitive. Perhaps Melissa was the anchor to reach Izuku Midoriya. Melissa looked at her notebook, as if looking at something beyond the pages. I met Izuku on a quirkless support forum, she said, her voice now filled with nostalgia. It was a forum where we all talked about our fears, about the frustration of being different in a world where everyone has power except us. Nezu didn't say anything. He didn't interrupt. He knew I was about to hear something important. At first, I was just another person on the forum. Melissa let out a small, bitter laugh. We were talking about the same thing. How the world seemed built to leave the quirkless behind. But then, Deku showed up. That was his username. Nezu raised an eyebrow. Deku. He murmured. Yes. Deku. At first, everyone ignored him. They said he was naive, that he didn't know what he was talking about. Melissa gripped the notebook tightly. But he didn't stop. He started posting ideas, theories, ways quirkless people could be heroes. Plans, techniques, ways to use intelligence and strategy to overcome the lack of a quirk. Nezu narrowed his eyes. And what did you do? Melissa smiled sadly. I supported him, she replied firmly. I told him he wasn't alone. I started responding to him, and he responded to me. We exchanged ideas. We challenged each other to think in new ways. We even talked about what we would do if we ever met. Melissa's voice began to crack. We agreed to meet one day, she said, her voice shaking. It was going to be at a mall. We were going to meet for the first time. We'd spent months talking on the forum, sharing our dreams of being heroes, of showing the world that we didn't need quirks to be strong. Nezu tilted his head, already beginning to understand. What happened that day, Melissa? He asked quietly. Melissa looked down, her lip trembling. I waited for hours, she said, her voice almost breaking. I texted him. I asked him if he was late. I told him it didn't matter if he was late, but he never came. Nezu didn't look away. He knew what was coming. He already knew it. I saw it on the news when I got home. Melissa brought her hand to her mouth, trying to contain the tremor in her voice. Izuku Midoriya. His house exploded in what they said was a gas leak. Nezu closed his eyes for a moment. And now you know that was a lie, he said, his voice firm. Melissa nodded, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her jacket. I failed him. Her voice was filled with bitterness. I failed him when he needed me most. Nezu let silence fill the room. He didn't interrupt her. He knew she had to say everything. But not this time. Melissa lifted her head, her eyes full of fire. The same fire Izuku had before he became Savvatar. This time, I'm not going to wait around. I'm not going to sit back and watch myself lose him again. Nezu watched her for a moment. His gaze, always calculating, now seemed softer. And your plan, Melissa? What do you need from me? He finally asked. He already knew the answer, but he wanted to hear it from her. Melissa leaned forward, her eyes shining. The timeless bubble, he said, placing his notebook on the table and opening it to a page filled with equations. The complex equations filled every space on the page. I'm going to create a space where neither speed nor time can affect it. Not to trap it. Not to enclose it. To reach it. Nezu looked at the equation with interest. To reach it. He repeated, with a slight smile. Melissa was the missing piece of the puzzle. Exactly. Melissa nodded determinedly. He doesn't have to come to us. I'm going to him. Nezu looked up, his eyes shining with admiration. Do you know what you're doing, Melissa? He asked with a gentle smile. You're creating a balance zone. A space where nothing moves, where everything is equal. Exactly, Melissa said, with a tired smile, and there, he won't be able to escape. Not because he's trapped, but because I'll be there with him. He won't be able to escape me. Nezu was silent for a moment. He looked at the equation, he looked at Melissa. You have my support, he finally said, smiling broadly. You have access to all of UA's resources. Melissa opened her eyes in surprise. Really? He asked, almost in disbelief. Nezu nodded. The world already lost Izuku once. We won't lose him again. Melissa smiled with tears in her eyes. Thank you, Nezu. The director raised his cup of tea. Don't thank me. Just bring that boy home. And with those words, the spark of hope began to burn. UA Operations Room 11:58 p.m. The lab was completely silent. Only the constant hum of the generators and control monitors could be heard. Blue lights flickered on a large, circular, metal platform in the center of the room. The timeless bubble. A colossal structure of metal and pure energy. Lines of blue light intertwined in circular patterns, forming a complex network of rings that floated around the platform. Gravity was different there. It felt as if the weight of the world were concentrated in that single spot. Melissa's shield stood in the center of the platform. Her face was serious. Her eyes were fixed on the void in front of her. Her body was covered in a black isolation suit, designed to protect her from extreme gravitational forces. But there was no protection against fear. There was no turning back. 3% chance of success, 97% catastrophic failure. But that didn't matter. All or nothing, he muttered, clenching his fists tightly. Nezu, Aizawa, and several UA teachers watched from a control room behind bulletproof glass. Their expressions were a mix of concern and hope. Nezu remained calm, but his eyes were fixed on Melissa. Are you sure about this, Melissa? Aizawa asked over the communicator. His voice sounded more human than ever. You can still stop. You don't have to do this. Melissa didn't respond immediately. Her eyes looked at the platform, then at her own hands. She remembered her conversations with Izuku. She remembered how he always said it only took one small step to change the world. "There are no heroes coming to save him," Melissa said, raising her head, looking straight toward the control room. "There's only me." The silence became absolute. "Activate the recall sequence," Nezu said, his voice full of determination. "Without hesitation, without hesitation." The energy rings began to move. The platform beneath Melissa began to glow a deep blue. The generators vibrated as the gravity inside the timeless bubble began to concentrate. Melissa looked up. It didn't matter where Izuku was, he would see her. "Izuku," she murmured in a soft voice. "Come here, I want to see you." There was no need to shout. There was no need to ask permission. Because he was always there. Flash. A flash of blue and white lit up the room. The world shook. The wind blew hard, stirring Melissa's hair as he arrived. The lights in the operating room flickered. Sensors overloaded. UA's systems rebooted for a second. Savvatar, the god of speed, appeared on the platform. Not running. Not fleeing. Just being there. There was no warning. There was no prior sound. He was there because he wanted to be there. Savvatar slowly stood up. His cobalt blue armor lit up with white energy lines flickering through its cracks. The white eyes of his helmet stared directly at Melissa. "Melissa," his metallic voice echoed throughout the room. It was the voice of a god who had seen eternity. Melissa didn't move. She didn't back down. "Izuku," he said, his voice soft but firm. Savvatar's helmet tilted to the side. The armor seemed to react to his voice. Not with fury, not with rage, with recognition. Slowly, Savvatar took a step forward. "I knew you'd call me," he said, his voice calmer than usual. "You've always known how to find me." Melissa nodded. "Because I never left," he replied, his voice full of conviction. "And neither did you." Silence. The white eyes of Savvatar's helmet blinked. And then, something incredible happened. He knelt in front of Melissa. Not because he was defeated, not because he was asking for forgiveness. He knelt down because he wanted to look at her, he wanted to see her with his own eyes again. The armor began to separate. Sections of blue metal began to float around his body. The metal plates disassembled one by one, floating in the air before falling to the ground with a dry sound. The white energy dissipated like steam from a train, freeing the young man trapped inside. Izuku Midoriya. Messy green hair. Green eyes with a look of calm and tiredness. Scars on his hands, his face, and his body. He was no longer a child. He was someone who had seen the darkness and survived. "I wanted to see you again," he said, his voice shaking. There was no more anger in his voice. Only sadness and longing. Just one more time. Melissa clenched her fists tightly. Tears began to fall down her cheeks, but she didn't back down. "Then look at me, Izuku," she said, her voice full of strength. "Because this time, I'm not leaving you behind." Izuku slowly raised his head. His eyes looked at her with a mixture of surprise and calm. "Melissa," he whispered. The largest ring of the timeless bubble closed around them. "Now," Melissa said, pressing the button on her glove. Gravity was distorted. The world shook. The ground disappeared beneath them. The light faded, and for an instant, there was no time and no speed. The control room monitors went dark. The space where Melissa and Izuku were became a perfect void. The timeless bubble had been activated. Nezu stared at the blank screen in front of him. His face showed no surprise. He knew this was coming. Did everything go dark?" Cementos asked, staring at the blank screens. Nezu shook his head. "No, it didn't turn off, it's working." Aizawa frowned. "Working? I don't see anything. No power signals. No traces of anything." Nezu smiled. "Exactly. Inside the bubble there was no sound, there was no light. But Melissa and Izuku were there, floating in the void. There were no armor. There were no gods. Solo Melissa shield and Izuku Midoriya ambos are quirkless." Melissa moved slowly, as if the air were water. Izuku too. "Were?" Izuku said, his eyes wide. His body floated like a leaf in the water. "Are we in the bubble?" Melissa smiled. "We're in my world, Izuku," she said in a calm, sweet voice. "And here, There's no speed. There's no time. She floated towards him and took his hand. Izuku looked at her in surprise. You can't run away from me now, she said, smiling. A tear floated down her face. Because I came looking for you. And for the first time, Izuku Midoriya didn't run. Inside the timeless bubble, there was no light nor darkness. There was no up or down. There was no left or right. Everything was empty. Everything was nothing. And in the middle of that nothingness there were the two of them. Izuku Midoriya and Melissa Shield. The real world was far away, the Speed Force too. It was a space between spaces. A point between reality and eternity. A place where neither time nor speed could dominate. Melissa floated slowly, her hair moving as if she were underwater. But she didn't look confused. She didn't look scared, she looked determined. In front of her, Izuku floated, eyes open. His body seemed lighter than ever. He was no longer wearing Savvatar's armor. He was just Izuku. Where are we? Izuku asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. His gaze was filled with wonder. Melissa smiled slightly. Her smile was soft, but her eyes were full of strength. We're in my world, she replied, moving slowly toward him. The timeless bubble. A space where neither speed nor time has power. Here, everything is still. You can't escape me, Izuku. Izuku looked at her with a mixture of surprise and acceptance. There was no anger on his face. No rage. Just tiredness. Why did you do this, Melissa? He asked, his voice filled with doubt. You don't have to do this. You don't have to stay here with me. Melissa approached slowly, her body floating gracefully. Yes. Yes, I have to do it, she said, her voice firm. Because if I don't, then everything we said in that forum, everything we dreamed, will be a lie. And I'm not a liar. Izuku looked her straight in the eyes. You're not a liar, she admitted, with a weak smile. You never were. They both remained silent for a moment. There was no rush, there was no time. Then something changed. The Brahmastra inside Izuku began to resonate. A heartbeat. Thump. Melissa felt a vibration in her chest. She didn't understand why, but she felt it. As if her heart had responded in kind. What was that? He asked, placing a hand on his chest. He could feel the heartbeat inside him. Izuku looked at his hands. It's the Brahmastra, he said, his voice deep. His eyes darkened slightly, as if remembering something distant. It's the spark that allowed me to see everything. Past, present, and future. When I was trapped in the Speed Force, the Brahmastra was the only thing that gave me form. It was my anchor. It was my only company. The void began to light up with small flashes of white and blue light. Pulses of energy danced around her. And now, it's resonating with you, Izuku said, a mixture of wonder and fear. Why? Melissa closed her eyes. She felt the pulse. She didn't just hear it, she felt it in her soul. Because you're not alone this time, he replied, slowly opening his eyes. His eyes were full of understanding. You don't have to carry this alone, Izuku. You don't have to be Savvatar. The words hit him hard. You don't have to be Savvatar. Izuku closed his eyes tightly. He shuddered. So what am I supposed to be? He asked, his voice filled with anger and confusion. If I'm not Savvatar, then what am I? I'm not a hero. I'm not a child. I'm nothing. White and blue lights began to swirl around him. The Brahmastra's energy responded to his confusion, his anger, his pain. Melissa didn't move away. No, you're none of those things, she said calmly, approaching him. But you're nothing less than Izuku Midoriya, too. Izuku opened his eyes. Izuku Midoriya died a long time ago, she said, her voice breaking. He died in obscurity, forgotten by everyone. Melissa moved even closer. Not for me, she said, reaching out for him. Never for me. Izuku looked at her with eyes full of tears. I can't go back, Melissa, her voice was a shaky whisper. I don't know how. I don't know how to get back. Melissa took his hand. Her fingers intertwined with his. You don't have to do it alone, he said, his voice full of strength. I'm here. I'm with you. Flash. The energy of the Brahmastra exploded around him. The empty space began to fill with lines of gold, electric blue, and bright white. The Speed Force merged with the vacuum of the bubble. The real world and the Speed Force began to overlap. Melissa felt the energy run through her body. The spark of the Brahmastra wasn't just in Izuku. Now it was in her too. Izuku, I can see them, she said, her eyes wide. I can see all of you. All versions of you. She saw every Izuku that existed. The Izuku who gave up. The Izuku who became a monster. The Izuku who was lost forever. But he also saw something else. He saw the bright line of the only version that refused to stop. It's you, Melissa said, her smile filled with warmth. The only version of you that never stopped running. The only version that never gave up. Izuku looked up, following the light she saw. He saw it. He saw the line of his own existence. The only line that never disappeared. It's me, he said, his voice filled with astonishment. It's me. Melissa held her hand tighter. Yes, Izuku, she said, tears streaming down her face. But this time, you're not running alone anymore. The white and blue light enveloped them both. The Brahmastra began to spin around them, emitting golden flashes. The time bubble began to compress around them, but it didn't feel oppressive. It felt like a hug. The rings of the timeless bubble spun faster. Izuku closed his eyes and took a deep breath. For the first time, his breathing wasn't rushed. It was calm. He opened his eyes and looked at Melissa. Melissa, he said with a genuine smile, the first real smile in centuries. I want to go back. Flash. The bubble world began to shake. Then let's go back together, Melissa said, her voice full of strength and love. This time, we're not going to run. We're going to walk together. The blue and gold lights intertwined. And for the first time in centuries, the boy who had run from everything, stopped running. Izuku Midoriya had returned. UA Officina de Nezu 10 a.m. The atmosphere in Nezu's office was solemn, but not tense. There was peace. The headmaster sat in his chair, his front legs crossed, a steaming cup of tea in front of him. His gaze was calm but sharp. In front of him were three figures. Izuku Midoriya, Melissa Shield and Shota Aizawa. Izuku sat up straight, his hands on his knees. He wasn't the same person he'd been a few days ago. There was no more anger in his eyes. There was calm. There was purpose. Melissa stood by her side, her gaze steady. Despite her exhaustion, she remained strong. She had run a race no one else could understand. Aizawa stood by the window. His gaze flicked from Nezu to Izuku, watching every little movement. He wasn't there to question, but to make sure everything went smoothly. The first to speak was Nezu. Izuku Midoriya is dead, he said, his voice firm but not cruel. Straight to the point. The world knows it. The Commission's records confirm it. And we can't undo that. Silence filled the room. Izuku lowered his head, processing those words. He'd been prepared to hear them, but it still hurt. The world had forgotten. There are no birth certificates. No identity records. No bank accounts or medical records, Nezu continued, taking a sip of his tea. The Hero Commission made sure to erase every trace of your existence. There is no Izuku Midoriya. Not in any file, not in any database. Melissa glanced at Izuku out of the corner of her eye. She placed her hand on his arm, giving it a gentle squeeze. Nezu smiled slightly. And that is an opportunity, he said, his eyes shining. Izuku's eyes slowly opened. It wasn't what he expected to hear. An opportunity? He asked, with a mixture of surprise and confusion. Nezu nodded. If Izuku Midoriya is dead, then you have a unique opportunity. Nezu placed his teacup on the table and looked directly at Izuku. You can be reborn. The world seemed to stop for a moment. Reborn? Melissa asked, raising an eyebrow. What do you mean, Nezu? Nezu leaned forward, interlacing his front paws. Izuku, you're no longer bound by the past. The Hero Commission erased your identity, yes. But that also means you have a chance to be someone new. Her smile widened slightly. You can create a new identity. A new story. A new beginning. Izuku remained silent, processing every word. Aizawa stepped forward, arms crossed. What Nezu's saying, kid, is that you can enter UA and be a hero, he said in his dry tone, but with a hint of understanding in his voice. Not as Izuku Midoriya, but as someone else. Izuku looked up, his breathing slowing. Get into UA, he asked, his voice shaking. As a student. Nezu nodded calmly. Yes, he said firmly. You already have the speed. You already have the strength. But now you need the guidance and the education. Not as Savvatar, not as Izuku Midoriya, but as someone completely new. Izuku's heart started beating faster. But, how? He asked, his voice filled with doubt. I can't use my real name. And everyone will know. No, they won't, Aizawa said, interrupting him. To the world, Savvatar is dead. The Commission's records have been destroyed. There's no proof you ever existed. Melissa looked at Nezu, her eyes lighting up as she understood what he was planning. A new identity, he said with a puzzled smile. Nezu, do you want me to create a new identity for Izuku? Nezu nodded with a sly smile. Exactly, he said, holding up a finger. Name, background, documents, medical history. It can all be created from scratch. With UA's resources and my access to information networks, it won't be difficult. Izuku felt a strange sensation in his chest. It wasn't fear, it was hope. I could come back. I could come back as someone new. He could come back as a hero. And what am I supposed to call myself? Izuku asked, with a small smile. It wasn't a full smile, but it was the beginning of one. Nezu raised his head, his sly smile still present. That, my friend, is up to you, he said, bowing his head. But whoever that person is, he's going to be a hero. Izuku lowered his head, thinking deeply. Melissa leaned toward him. You already know the name, Izuku, he said, with a genuine smile. You've had it from the beginning. Izuku slowly raised his head. His eyes shone clearly. Yes, she said firmly. Her voice was no longer trembling. I know what I want to call myself. Nezu nodded, as if he already knew the answer. Very well, so tell me, what will your new name be? Izuku looked at every person in the room. At Melissa, who never stopped searching for him. At Aizawa, who was now willing to guide him. And at Nezu, the strategist who had given him a chance at rebirth. He took a deep breath. Hikaru Shira, he said clearly and with conviction. That will be my new name. Nezu smiled widely. Hikaru Shira, huh, he repeated, his voice full of approval. Hikaru, for the light. Shira, for the silver that gleams with time. A fitting name for someone who has crossed eternity and returned. Melissa smiled tightly. Sounds perfect. Aizawa closed his eyes, smiling slightly. Welcome back, Hikaru. The world no longer knew Izuku Midoriya. But the world would soon meet Hikaru Shira. Days later, UA first day of classes. The students of Class 1A were sitting at their desks, chatting amongst themselves. Bakugo was staring out the window, arms crossed, uninterested. Aizawa entered the classroom, with his usual tired look. Listen, everyone, he said in a raspy voice. We have a new student today. The door opened slowly. A young man with messy green hair walked in, his eyes calm and a peaceful smile on his face. My name is Hikaru Shira, he said, looking from one to the other. I hope we can learn together. Bakugo looked up sharply, his eyes widened in disbelief. No. It can't be, he murmured, his heart pounding. But Hikaru just smiled. Shiragane Residence, Musudafu Outpost 7:45 p.m. The sunset painted the sky shades of orange, pink, and purple. The clouds moved slowly, and a gentle breeze caressed the trees. The tranquility of the outside world contrasted with the warmth and life inside the house. A door opened with a flash of blue and white light. Flash. In less than a blink of an eye, Hikaru Shiragane appeared at the entrance of his home. He was no longer the young man who had crossed the Speed Force. He was now a man. A hero. Quicksilver, the fastest hero in the world. His green hair was still messy, but he had matured with time. His body was stronger, more defined, with scars that told stories of past battles. He wore his hero costume, a white outfit with cobalt blue lines running down his chest and arms, forming a lightning bolt design in the center. His face was relaxed, with a calm smile that only those who have found peace can have. Dad's home. A child's voice shouted from inside the house. Eri appeared running down the hallway, a big smile on her face. Her white hair swayed as she ran, her horn still visible on her forehead, but much smaller than before. Eri was 15 now, and her smile was bright. Eri, slow down. A voice shouted from the kitchen. Melissa Shield Shirogane appeared holding a tiny baby in her arms. Her blonde hair was tied back in a high ponytail, and she was wearing a white t-shirt and gray sweatpants. Despite her tiredness, her face was lit by a warm smile. "Hikaru, you came just in time," she said, with a knowing look. It was the look of someone who no longer had to worry about the person she loved going missing again. Hikaru smiled and approached with a flash of speed. In an instant, he was in front of her. "I wouldn't miss dinner for anything," he replied, kissing Melissa on the forehead and then the baby in her arms. Melissa smiled, but frowned slightly. "Hikaru, how many times do I have to tell you not to use your speed inside the house?" she said with a tired but loving smile. Hikaru raised his hands, feigning innocence. Sorry, old habits, you know." Melissa laughed. "Old habits die hard," she replied, with a smile only she could give him. Eri ran over and hugged Hikaru from behind. Dad, will you tell us the story of the timeless bubble again?" she asked, her eyes shining. Hikaru let out a small laugh. "Again, I've counted it like 100 times, Eri." Eri puffed out her cheeks, pouting like she knew it always worked. "But this time I want to hear the part where Mom hits you with logic and catches you." Melissa burst out laughing. "Oh, honey, that part is my favorite, too." Hikaru sighed, lifting Eri into his arms as if she weighed nothing. Okay, but it'll be after dinner, okay?" Eri nodded enthusiastically. Okay, but this time don't skip the part where you cry." Hikaru squinted at her. "Who taught you to be so naughty?" Melissa raised her hand with a guilty smile. "Me," he replied with a mischievous smile. Hikaru shook his head, but couldn't stop smiling. A scream from the back of the house interrupted the moment. In less than a second, I was in the room. 5-year-old Toshinori Shirogane stood next to a table with an overturned glass. His blonde hair was a mess, and he wore a look of pure panic. He seemed to know he'd made a mistake. "It wasn't my fault, Dad," he said, his hands raised. "The glass hit me first." Hikaru knelt down and patted her head. "The old blame the glass trick, huh?" he said with a mocking smile. "Don't worry, kiddo, I used that excuse when I was a kid, too. It didn't work then, and it won't work now." Toshinori lowered his head. "Am I going to be punished?" Hikaru lifted him up in his arms, spinning with him in the air. "Of course not, but you're going to clean this up," she said, leading him into the kitchen as Toshinori laughed out loud. In the kitchen, Melissa was preparing food while holding the baby, Inko, in her left arm. Little Inko was sleeping soundly, a small smile on her face. She looked so much like Izuku's mother it hurt, but in a beautiful way. "Toshinori made a mess again, didn't he?" Melissa asked, without needing to look back. Hikaru shrugged. "Yeah, but this time the glass was the culprit, according to him." Melissa laughed softly. "Sounds like you." Hikaru looked at Melissa and her children. He looked at everything he had built with his own hands. He had spent centuries trapped in the Speed Force. Centuries of running, escaping, fleeing. But now, he had finally stopped. "I didn't need to run anymore. It's a good day," Hikaru said, with a calm smile. Melissa glanced at him. "Yes, it is." The two shared a look that needed no words. Because this time, they had won. Flash. Somewhere in the world, a news report on television showed Quicksilver, the world's fastest hero, saving a city from a natural disaster. Quicksilver, the world's fastest hero, has saved the city from another collapse. But no one in that house was watching television. Because the fastest hero in the world had found his home. The fastest hero in the world had stopped. And this time, I wasn't going to run. "Dad, can you tell the story again?" Eri asked, smiling broadly. Hikaru smiled. "Sure, honey, this time, without skipping anything. The story of a quirkless boy who became a speed god, and then, a man. The man named Hikaru Shirogane. To be continued. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Now we will see you in the next video.